Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for the meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting on the live Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the close of this meeting. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. There's no one. So to ensure the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile devices are turned to silent. Welcome to those in attendance. Can I now ask Mrs. Gibbons to introduce all the officers for this morning's meeting?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair. My name is Kelly Gibbons. I am the Service Manager for the Development Management Team. To my right, I have Joshua Bailey, who will be presenting item 6. Simon Withers will be presenting item 7, and then Jack Dyer will be presenting item 8, and Amber Morris item 9. We also have Katie Jones on behalf of the Local Planning Authority with us, and to my left, Georgina Coley will be the legal advisor for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the items on the agenda. Apologies for absence. We received apologies from Councillor Taylor. Item 2, name substitutes. Councillor Foxton is acting as a substitute for Councillor Taylor. Can I just also add to the apologies, Councillor who is going to Councillor Cowardine, who is leaving early, has to go to a funeral. Right. Can I now ask if anyone wishes to declare an interest in any of the items before us for decision? There are none. Then I move on to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November 2025. Are the minutes of the meeting approved? Please indicate. Those in favour. Those against? Abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. Right, I have no announcements under item 5. I now request the speakers in person for the agenda item 6 in the meeting, Mr. Milne, Mr. Irwin and Mr. Eacock, please take their seats in the public participation tables at the front. Welcome to the meeting, and I will call you to speak following the officer's presentation on the application. I'll now hand over to the officer to land at the rear of Prospect Place, St Martin's Avenue, Hereford. Proposed erection of 7 townhouses with associated development.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning to everybody. The application site comprises an irregularly shaped land parcel which is located to the east of 17 to 41 St Martin Street, to the north of 8 to 15 St Martin's Avenue, also known as Prospect Place, to the west of Bishop's Meadow Recreational Grounds, and the south of residential curtilage associated with 15 St Martin Street. As you've heard from the Chairman, this application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 7 two-bedroom townhouses together with associated development. And for context, the application site is denoted by the red star on screen. Site boundaries comprise a mixture of high close-board fencing, scrub, semi-mature trees, hedgerow and brick wall. The site is relatively flat with land uses surrounding, predominantly residential, with the occasional commercial use, recreational use or car park. The northern part of the site comprises a combination of scrub, vegetation and semi-mature tree, with the southern part of the site presently used as a leasable parking area for surrounding properties. A small brick outbuilding lies to the northwest of this parking area and is considered by officers to be curtilage listed. Existing vehicular and pedestrian access heads southwest from the parking area, running in between numbers 7 and 8 St Martin's Avenue, before joining up with the local highway network at St Martin's Avenue. As highlighted within the report, the site is wholly within flood zone 3, although there are flood defence walls to the immediate east which are associated with the Hereford Flood Alleviation Scheme, and that the site is also wholly within the Hereford Central Conservation Area and Hereford Area of Archaeological Importance, and that there are 3 scheduled monuments in reasonable proximity to the application site. Further east within Bishop's Meadow, there is a row of mature lime trees which benefit from a tree protection order. On screen now, as it just comes up, is the location plan on your left and the existing site plan on the right. This is the proposed site plan, which comprises a 3-storey brick terrace, permeable paving to the east of the building to provide pedestrian access to each townhouse, and a forecourt to the west from which vehicular access would be provided. Bin storage is proposed to be positioned adjacent to the existing tarmac parking area, which is proposed to be retained. The proposed elevations on screen shows the proposed terrace would have a central breakout feature with a gablet under a slate dual-pitched main roof and an uninterrupted series of full gable-ended pitched roofs. The proposed floor plan shows garaging, cycle storage and WCs would be provided on the ground floor, with living accommodation provided above on the first and second floors. Other works included with the application includes altering the junction onto St Martin's Avenue with a proposed new drop curb and the extension of the footway with the bollards behind, which you can see visually illustrated on screen. And then the next couple of slides are just a handful of illustrations and cross sections which seek to provide an indicative view of the proposed development, largely when viewed from Bishop's Meadow, and I've just placed a couple of photos taken from Bishop's Meadow looking west back in towards the site. And the next slide, which will just bring up a couple of indicative 3D views. And then the next few slides are now going to be site photographs. Firstly, thank you to those who managed to brave the weather yesterday to attend the site inspection, which I do trust, as always, was very useful. So these first photographs were taken following our meeting yesterday, beginning with the top left, which is taken from the eastern site boundary looking west towards properties on St Martin Street. The top right photo is taken from the northern site boundary looking south towards the parking area and St Martin's Avenue. The bottom right photo is taken just beyond the western site boundary within an alleyway which provides access to the rear of properties for St Martin Street looking east out towards Bishop's Meadow. And the bottom left photo is taken from the parking area at the southern boundary looking north, with the dwelling houses that you can pick up, those being north of Y Street beyond Y Street car park. You'll notice on that where there is a brown estate car to the left, there's obscures the existing outbuilding, which you would have seen yesterday, which I'll just bring up now on the next slide. There we go, which is the existing outbuilding in situ, which officers consider to be curtilage listed. And then a few more site photos now, beginning in the top left, which is taken from the west of the parking area, just looking northeast, and the top right photo looking in a more easterly direction. The bottom right photo is then taken from the alleyway from which vehicular access to the site is achieved from, as well as the bottom left photo, which is taken a little bit further south, but both looking north. And then you'll also note there the existing passageway for properties to the rear of St Martin Street, which is to the right of the blue garage that you can see directly at the end of that alleyway. Staying with the access, the next slide is then going to bring up as follows. The top left photo is looking south then towards the junction with St Martin's Avenue, and you see the tap house on the other side of the road. And then next to that is taken from St Martin's Avenue again in the road itself, looking back up the alleyway. And the bottom two photos are then just showing visibility onto St Martin's Avenue, looking left and right respectively. And then the next slide, which is going to pan out a bit further now, which beginning with the top left photo, which is taken a little further east along St Martin's Avenue, looking northwest towards the access, so you can see the extent of the footway improvement works as proposed. The top right photo is then taken just east of 16 St Martin's Avenue, again looking northwest into the site. The bottom right photo is then taken just down the other side of the little walkway that we walked along yesterday, looking northwest towards the community sports park and also the application site, panning further west. And then the bottom left photo is more within Bishop's Meadow, looking west and northwest towards the site, noticing you can then pick out the properties both from St Martin Street and then also laterally with Y Street in the more eastern side of that particular photograph. And then just again a couple of slides from the other side of the site. The top left photo was taken from St Martin Street adjacent to Taylor's Court, looking northeast. The lime trees that you can sort of see there in the background and acting as a sort of good reference point for where Bishop's Meadow is and the extent of that. The top right photo then is taken from Y Street car park, looking sort of in a south-southeast direction, and then there is a slightly closer photo which is in the bottom right of your screen directly looking south. And then the bottom left photo is taken from St Martin Street looking southeast, and that's close to the junction with Y Street. And again, finally on the next slide, there is one more set of photos which is taken out further again. The top left taken from Y Bridge looking southeast. The top right photo taken from adjacent to the Bishop's Meadow Community Sports Park just off Y Street looking southwest. And then the bottom two photos are taken from the eastern extent of Bishop's Meadow just looking west towards the application site. And then the next slide on screen is just going to bring up the relevant material planning considerations which follow the subheaded sections of the officer appraisal, which I trust are fairly self-explanatory and seek to highlight the relevant policies of both the Council's core strategy as well as where it is consistent with the National Planning Policy Framework. Since the publication of the report, I just draw your attention to the schedule of updates in which you'll note the 4 letters of representation received from one interested party, which is clarified in the officer comments, and to also note in relation to the unregistered land along the alleyway, the local planning authority has now received the requisite completed notice and revised ownership certificate D, and the officers have now erected new site notices around the application site. But in reaffirming section 1.51 of the report, this does not prevent the committee from at least being able to make a resolution. It simply means that no formal determination of the application will be made until the 6th of January 2026 at the earliest. And if we bring up the next slide, which will just be the final slide, there is now just a slight change to the recommendation as was originally published, although in simple terms this effectively omits what was part 2 in the original officer recommendation. But for completeness, the revised recommendation is on screen for you there, and it's subject to the completion of the planning obligation agreement to secure financial contributions towards the management costs of flood risk infrastructure as operated by the Environment Agency, and that new material planning considerations arise which may otherwise lead to a revised officer recommendation. The Planning Commission is recommended for approval subject to conditions as outlaid in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. And now we'll move on to public speakers. I'll invite Mr. Milne to speak on behalf of Hereford City Council. You have 3 minutes.
Hereford City Council, on behalf of local residents, objects. Discussing the application in committee, elected members considered this an unsuitable site for development, certainly of this scale. Members expressed misgivings of the susceptibility of the site to flooding, mindful of the Environment Agency's warning as it is in Flood Zone 3, very evident following Storm Dennis in February 2020, which tested the limits of the defences. Also of the unsuitability of the sole access to the site regarded as too narrow for emergency service vehicles. However, I leave the public speaker and local member to say more about those issues. As the landscape officer pointed out, its effects on the adjacent Bishop's Meadow, given the importance of this public open space, excite local plan policies SS6 for environmental quality, LD1 for landscape and townscape, LD3 for green infrastructure, and LD4 for historic environment. Overlooking both the park on one side and private properties on the other, such a building would exert an overbearing presence on both. While the reduction in height and the redesigned aesthetic of the amended scheme is recognised, we do consider this still to be bulky for such a tight and sensitive site. After all, it lies within the city conservation area, affecting the siting of a great many listed buildings, and within the designated area of archaeological importance and a stone's throw from the road scheduled ancient monument. This is a key site for the early history of Hereford, where development risks destroying undisturbed medieval remains from at least the 11th century, as the recent advice from Historic England's Dr. Rimington makes clear. Historic England adds that development here would also harm the legibility of the well-preserved layout of the historic St Martin's suburb. The Conservation Officer objects to the less than substantial harm of the loss of historic open space within the conservation area, but likes the Georgian character of the amended scheme. This is better than the previous modernistic block, but neo-Georgian buildings can so easily turn out as horrible pastiches of the style if specifiers fail to understand proper proportion, materials and details of brickwork and joinery. So, if it is approved, a high level of scholarship would need to be brought to the project, and so it needs to be more carefully conditioned and overseen to ensure this than is provided for in the officer's report. If we had a strategic plan to guide development in the city, I suspect that for this St Martin's site, we would instead be rebuilding the community of houses which made way for the unattractive car park off Wise Street as being the better option in terms of townscape quality, accessibility and sustainability. In summary, therefore, refusal is recommended on the grounds that, taken together, the identified harms are not demonstrably outweighed by benefits as the NPPF requires at paragraph 11. No local plan policies HD2, SS6, LD1, LD3 and LD4 may be cited. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I move on to Mr. Irwin to speak in objection to the application. You have 3 minutes.
Warren, thank you. My name is Trevor Irwin. My home backs onto the application site, and I've lived in St Martin's Street for 14 years. As mentioned, I'm surprised that we're hearing this application today, as recently it was uncovered that the applicant does not own the alleyway, and the ownership of the alleyway is unknown. From my understanding, this would make the application invalid, and as notices have gone up yesterday, it's until at least the 5th of January, and would also question how officers of the council could make informed decisions when at the time of the communication they didn't know that the ownership was under question. The site access, the alleyway access is wholly inadequate for the intensification that this development would result in. It is too narrow for fire appliances, keeping them too far from the houses under building regs. The applicant suggests a sprinkler system, but this would mean fire crews carrying their equipment for up to 85 metres and does not take into account the risk to neighbouring properties or car fires. The fire officer's expert view is that appliances should be no more than 45 metres from any house. This is not achievable. These problems would be magnified by the intensification of use because of the 7 new garages and additional traffic from visitors, delivery vans and public services. As stated at the beginning, the applicant does not own the alleyway, so there is no way for the council to require new residents to maintain the alleyway in the medium to long term, and it would soon deteriorate into its present unsatisfactory condition. This points to the developer not ensuring the proposal would function well in the long term, a key requirement of national planning policy which should be avoided. The proposal will result in a significant overdevelopment and major loss of privacy. The 3-storey terrace with large gable ends would stand only 1 metre from a neighbouring garden and 6 metres from other neighbouring fences. It would be so tight that all cars will have difficulty accessing the garages. There would be a row of large windows at first and second floor levels overlooking private gardens. There is significant evidence that the proposal is unacceptable because it fails to preserve the Hereford Conservation Area, Grade 2 listed buildings and historically significant monuments with views onto Bishop's Meadow. Officers in Historic England identify the site and surroundings as being extremely sensitive to change. A professional review of the recently submitted Heritage Impact Assessment found its analysis seriously lacking and the most unsound basis for the council to make informed decisions. For example, the assessment treats the site as being unattractive leftover land, and this is wrong. The site comprises medieval burgage plots and as recently as 1999, rear gardens and curtilages of 3 Grade 2 listed buildings. The assessment has been submitted as an afterthought rather than an important analysis to inform the design process. Historic England finds the assessment lacking and wrong, and the landscape officer objects to the proposal. The agent relies upon prior non-binding discussions with the conservation team to justify this scheme. All these discussions and application responses predate any proper heritage assessment. The Environment Agency accepts the proposal, but the recent flooding of Monmouth Town Centre proves unforeseen flood events occur, despite the best laid plans, and the damage caused to all involved is totally heartbreaking. In conclusion, local residents' objections can be summed up as being that the proposal is too tall, too close and too much for the site and its surroundings, and I implore the committee to decline this application.
Right, thank you. And now I move on to invite Mr. Eacock on behalf of the applicant to speak in support. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm not going to ramble on too long. I think the committee report presented to you is sufficiently detailed in answering all of the technical issues that have been arisen or have arisen as part of this proposal. It's taken a long time to reach a design resolution for this site and has incurred very different design solutions throughout the sort of history of the site. With respect to the comments made by the Town Council, they raised questions regarding the archaeology. An archaeological investigation has already been undertaken on this site with trenches dug and all of the information and evidence and sort of archaeological sort of interesting materials found has been set into record officially now. Further work will also need to be undertaken. There is no objection on that basis from the archaeology department. The design, as I say, is important to get right, and conditions have been imposed to make sure that the finer details, the devil is in the detail when it comes to successful design, and conditions are imposed or suggested to be imposed as part of the recommendation. So that directly contradicts the officer recommendation and from your conservation team. And with respect to the local residents, the ownership resolution has been reached. Certificate D has been published in the local press. It's a technical matter as opposed to a matter which would constrain or inhibit development. With respect to the lack of access to fire appliances, we've received advice from a member of the Institute of Fire Engineers to say that sprinkler or misting systems within each of the properties is fully compliant with building regulations, and that has been confirmed by our own building regulations officers. It doesn't represent overdevelopment, otherwise your planning officers and your conservation officers would have raised this as a material aspect of the determination process. And access to the garages proposed as part of the development is fully compliant with adopted standards. And then finally, the heritage assessment has been accepted by the Heritage England and your own conservation officers, and has been prepared to a professional standard by the gentleman that was responsible for setting up the professional body that all heritage consultants now subscribe to. So I think that's a little misleading, in fairness. I don't think I can add any more to the report. It's extremely detailed and has been extremely thoroughly investigated as part of this process, because this is a complex site. It's an edge-of-centre brownfield site with historic environment, and this has been one of the key aspects as to why it's taken so long to come to you. Other than that, I fully endorse the recommendation. The applicant is fully happy to accept the requirements of the Section 106 agreement, and those monies will safeguard the flood defences.
Okay.
And also...
I'm afraid I'm going to ask you to wind up now.
Okay, thank you very much.
3 minutes. Thank you. If you could take your seats back in the public gallery, please. Councillor Tillett is the local ward member for this item. He speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the meeting. He does not have a vote. He has a 10-minute time limit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I start by thanking Mr. Bailey for his extremely thorough and lengthy report, and also to him and to you, Chair, and to all the committee members who made the trip to the heart of God's own country in the South Wye in a truly atrocious weather yesterday. But as Mr. Bailey said, I hope you agree it was a necessary visit to understand this rather hidden little spot in the centre of the city. The report at summary 8.7 states this application presents a fine balance. I agree completely. At section 2.1, 17 policies of the core strategy are listed as relevant, and I will contest that many of those are on a knife edge. This is apparent from the huge raft of conditions which are laid down at the end of the report, many of which are insistent that must take place before even commencement of work. The report also includes some suggestions and circumstances in which you may feel that the application should be refused. As you'll have heard, the site is within a conservation area, an area of archaeological importance, and close to 3 scheduled monuments, plus Grade 2 listed buildings along St Martin's Street, virtually the only remaining Georgian Victorian terrace which is entirely residential in the city. Councillor Milne has expressed opposition on behalf of the City Council, and as a qualified archaeologist he has explained some of the heritage concerns. There are likely remains of medieval settlement on the site. You've heard that confirmed by the applicant. And you'll see that a full archaeological survey is listed as a condition, a clear indication of the site's importance. I hope you've also had a chance to see that the heritage impact assessment submitted by the applicant at the end of October is considered flawed and is challenged by another independent source, Sam Hale, a historic buildings consultant, in his report submitted on the 23rd of November by Mr. Smith. If you've not had a chance to notice that in the many considerable representations, let me just give you a quick summary in which this independent report considers the HIA has not been carried out to best practice guidance, little or no formal analysis has been carried out of heritage significance or the impact of the proposals. He concludes it would be impossible for the local authority to come to any meaningful decision on the impact of the historic environment. And that is echoed by Historic England on the 18th of November, who feel that the HIA does not sufficiently consider the archaeological record of the site. The conclusion that the proposal does not disturb areas of known archaeological significance is not supported by the evidence, say Historic England. The proposal will result in loss of these remains and the legibility of the form of the medieval suburb. LD4 and SS6 of the core strategy are really quite clear. There is an obligation to protect, conserve and enhance heritage assets and their settings. Development proposals should contribute to character and local distinctiveness, especially within conservation areas. MPPF 219 goes even further. Development in these areas should enhance or better reveal the significance and is in favour of proposals that preserve elements of the setting, making a positive contribution to the asset or better reveal its significance. Committee, it really is quite hard to see how 7 three-storey houses and car parking can possibly achieve this. As we've heard, the site is wholly within flood zone 3. There are existing flood defences, although these have already required leakage repair since the floods of 2020. No residential accommodation is to be permitted on ground level, and you'll see at 8.8 that a section of 106 agreement is required by the Environment Agency to install not further repair to the wall, but supplementary pumping for the site. The report makes it clear that without a Section 106 agreement, for further flood defence, this application will fail. The applicant in the paperwork has challenged the legitimacy of the Environment Agency to even ask for this money. I think in his last gasps, we did possibly at the courtroom door hear him change that line, and they will accept it. But I feel that we'll need clarification because clearly without it, it fails. There is a certain irony, colleagues, that as we meet today, the River Wye is in flood in Hereford. It has exceeded the upper prediction at Bredwardine and at Hay and is currently, when I last looked, 4.51 and still rising at the Old Bridge in Hereford. It is barely 3 weeks since extensive flooding in southwest Herefordshire, particularly around Ewes Harold, overwhelmed countless properties. And these were properties which had never flooded and were told will never flood. How many more developments can we responsibly approve in known flood zones? Members on the site visit yesterday will have seen the extremely narrow access to the site. The alley is barely the width of a car and has one property opening directly onto it. The difficulties of access during construction and thereafter will be significant for anything other than a small car and will materially affect neighbouring properties. In particular, we've heard already about the access problems for emergency vehicles, particularly fire tenders, which will not be able to achieve the 45-metre limit. and so it's proposed that a sprinkler system will compensate for fire tenders not being able to reach the site. Again, are these really the sort of properties that should be built on a site like this? Furthermore, again, as you will have seen yesterday, access and visibility from the alley out onto St Martin's Street is very poor. Half of the avenue has no footway at all, despite it being very heavily used as a route for pedestrians and cyclists to cross into Bishop's Meadow and then access the north of the city via the Victoria Bridge. The swimming pool car park directly opposite is heavily used by cars, coaches, and even crocodiles of children walking across for their swimming lessons from nearby Riverside School. Although there are proposals to widen the footway near the access point, it does not address the complete lack of footway in the rest of St Martin's Avenue or in any way improve the situation for the heavy footfall and wheelfall, if such a word exists, in St Martin's Avenue. In addition, and this is somewhere where I profoundly disagree with the report, the loss of the leased parking spaces towards the rear for local residents will add to greater pressure, particularly on St Martin's Street, where there is a free 1 hour parking limit, plus a very large number of residents' parkings permits, so that consequently the street is often overcrowded and indeed local residents can't park as it is. The loss of those leased spaces behind St Martin's Avenue will only exacerbate this situation. Policy MT1 clearly is in conflict here, and again, another critical condition requires the acceptance of these small alterations to the footway splay and visibility before construction can begin. And all of this when ownership of the access alley has not even been resolved. You'll see it, section 810, and we've heard that ownership certificate must be resolved before commencement. Furthermore, this application lacks any landscaping scheme to comply with LD3. This is, by definition of LD3, a valued landscape with an adjoining floodplain. So, in conclusion, Chair, Mr. Bailey rightly says this application presents a fine balance. The report has a long list of relevant policies, as indeed does the applicant's most recent submissions at the end of October. In mitigation, there are no less than 30 conditions in the recommendation which attempt to address the concerns and conflicts with the core strategy and the MPPF. Given that there are so many of these, many of which may be regarded as knife edge, I would urge you to consider the question of balance and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one clarification. The issue of the land ownership of the access is not relevant in this particular application. We regularly have applications on land that is not owned by the applicant, and we have to, under planning law, consider those without favour. Right, we'll stop open debate. Speakers, please. Nobody?
Yes.
Oh, Councillor Baker. Councillor Simmons, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I thank, first of all, Josh Bailey for his very detailed report and for looking after us at the rather damp site visit yesterday. All very useful. My first time at that particular site, never been there before, but it seemed to me at the time to be an ideal site ripe for development. It's also encouraging to see a terrace of 7 two-bedroom houses. We very rarely see terraces on this committee, and it makes a nice change. Whether they will complement the 2 existing terraces there, I don't know, but they will be of a contemporary design, which of course the Georgian one, that terrace, was contemporary at its time, wasn't it? But of course we don't build them to that style anymore. but from the drawings I've seen, it would seem to be suitable. There is no doubt that there is a very tight access onto this site. And we're told that some emergency services will have access. There is a report within the report from the fire service, but of course, and then we were assured in there that building control will decide whether or not this is suitable. And we have to leave it to those experts to make those decisions. It's also important to ensure that there is suitable landscaping on the existing land there once the development is complete. And I would suggest that a permeable surface would be useful rather than whole slabs of tarmac, which we don't really want down there. And with all those things in mind, I'm left that I should support the officer recommendation for approval. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. My initial feeling is that in an urban location, this is sustainable location for development. We do need more two-bedroom houses, and I do support that need, and this being, as I said, a sustainable location for walking, cycling, etc., and access to the town centre. However, the case officer's report was really detailed, and I very much welcome that, and I think has conveyed that, as has been said already, the knife-edge balance that sits in many of the decisions here. I think for me, whilst I do support development in this location, I don't feel that this is the right development in the location. I feel the scale of it in terms of its height and massing with existing context of the heritage designation of the conservation area, the listed buildings, the importance of the meadow particularly. It's clear that the orientation and footprint of the building has been scoped by the sewer and the need to protect that, by the 8-metre buffer to the flood defence works. I think there are issues with the access. I think for me that there is no landscape plan with this, and I notice it is a condition, but I think this absolutely hinges on the acceptability of this development with regards to the landscaping. It is not clear that landscaping can be brought forward because of the 8-metre setback from the flood defences. I know it says no built development. It is silent on whether landscaping can be within that 8-metre buffer. And I'm afraid that I disagree with 7.28, paragraph 7.28 of the officer's report, that there's a well-established soft landscape eastern boundary with the Bishop's Meadow that provides a well-defined and appropriate transition. I feel that that building at the ridge height of, I think it's nearly 12 metres, will significantly overlook the meadow. That gap between the buildings provided a real offset from the park and to the listed buildings, and the imposition of a very large building in that space will completely be an abrupt join to the conservation area, within the conservation area, and an abrupt point to the meadow, and therefore I feel on grounds of LD1, LD2, LD3, LD4 that I cannot support it. Furthermore, I feel that there are no renewable energy generations elements, no grey water recycling elements. We've got no EV charge points, I suspect, possibly because of the fire risk, I don't know, and the lack of, as we've said, of a fire engine to get down there. So I don't feel we're in conformity with SD1 either. I don't feel we're in conformity with SS6 in terms of quality and distinctiveness either. I can see that there's a real improvement from the previous application in terms of the modern development. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Thomas.
I thought it was a sort of general agreement between us that we will not build any more houses in the floodplain. I used to play squash, and I don't know how many times over the years I couldn't go and play in the baths because the squash courts, which are underneath, admittedly, were flooded. it's not long ago since it did flood. Was it 3 or 4 years ago? I just don't think I agree with everything that Councillor Simmons has said about the design of it, etc., etc. We can't have charging points because obviously they could be. It's in flood zone 3. They could be below water. That would cause a major problem. And we desperately need these sort of houses in Hereford, but not here. So I would totally support the fact that we should refuse this application as it stands.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, this application has been round in various iterations for several years, originally since I think 2007. So it's got a long history. But the main problem is it's flood zone 3. We should not at any time now be building on flood areas that are known to flood. As the ward council has already said, the flood defence fences that were put up only fairly recently now need repair. All that area is well known to flood. We've had recent evidence of flooding, more today. So once again, this site is simply not suitable. I'm sorry to say, because we do need the housing, but this site is simply not suitable. The access is, as we all see, is very difficult. I love the photographs that Mr. Bailey sent, and thank you for the very comprehensive report. It took me an hour and a half to get through it. You didn't feature all the traffic that's normally there. That extremely well used road to the swimming pool and to access Bishop's Meadow. This site simply is not suitable for housing of this nature. So I would support a refusal.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Gennard.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for this. I note that development is only acceptable in the view of the Environment Agency as submitted if the developer will pay forward £35,000, and this is, I believe, secured by Section 106. But as I understand it, the Section 106 hasn't actually been signed. So it's a sort of a concern for me that the development would require that Section 106 money, but it hasn't actually been signed as yet.
That follow on from it, whether it was or not approved. If it was approved, it would be conditional on that being signed. So,
Yeah, just to clarify that. So if the resolution is to approve, then they would move forward to sign the Section 106 before a decision would be issued. So it's the recommendation is for the completion of the Section 106 agreements prior to issue of a decision.
yeah.
Can
Did
I-
you want to just finish? Did you want to finish? Yeah, okay.
Can I just ask, if having heard some of the debate so far, if there were grounds to resolution to refuse, do we need to have that within the grounds to refuse?
Yes.
Okay, so that's within my grounds as well then to refuse. Thank you.
Right. Any other speakers? If there are no other speakers, can I ask for someone to make a proposition? Councillor Simmons or Councillor Thomas?
I unfortunately will have to suppose that we refuse this application.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Microphone. So,
Sorry, having a loud voice and everything about microphones. I, unfortunately, and I must say that Josh has done a huge amount of work on this, but I will have to ask for this to be refused.
on the grounds as outlined.
On the proposed outlines that Councillor Simmons has done. Thank you.
I'll second that then. Thank you very much.
I'll second my proposal. Yes. If you can just outline those grounds again, please, just for the
Okay.
clarification.
Having looked through our core strategy. I refused on the grounds of LD1, LD2, LD3, LD4, SD1 and SS6. And the reliance on the planning obligation with Environment Agency. Thank you.
On MT1.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I've made notes when you were talking before, so I've got those in terms of scale, design, location, scale, design, siting of the building, the lack of the landscape plan, landscape mitigation, the lack of renewable energy proposals, and there's a non-conformity in terms of quality and distinctiveness of the area and the impact on the heritage assets. Namely the conservation area. I don't know if we went into anything
and
other
also
than
the
conservation
Bishop's Meadow being an important landscape designated park, I think. Thank you.
And then, did you say MT1? That's a... I need the reason, sort of a bit more of an explanation from you though, unfortunately, Councillor Thomas. MT1 in terms of highways, if you know, we just need you to expand a little bit on what the impact or the concerns are in relation to highways.
MT1 is highways, yes. There's just not enough room, no parking. We were lost of parking, so all those, everything around highways is wrong. It's a very busy site, that swim bars, and to add traffic to this, I think, is a very bad idea.
Bear with me. I think, is it worth just going over to Katie Jones, just have a little, discussion about the highways impact so that you can understand the local highway authority view on that matter. Obviously, you've got that in the reports, and I think we sort of have no objection on that basis. But if Katie can just expand on that for me.
Yeah, in terms of car parking, obviously the site is sustainably located. So I think that the sustainable location would outweigh any offset of car parking, especially given that there is a large car park almost opposite the site where passes can be, season tickets can be purchased if necessary. I think in terms of the width of the access, it is very narrow. However, a fire tender would be able to access the site. Having looked on the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Fire group website, their general fire tenders are 2.3 metres wide, and at the very narrowest, tiny pinch point, it's 2.6 metres wide, generally 2.9 metres. So a fire tender would be able to access down the alleyway, and I think if we were to refuse the application on highway grounds, I'm not convinced we would be in a good position.
Right. Bearing that in mind, do you wish to continue that, or bearing in mind that we've got a whole raft of reasons?
I would totally disagree. A fire engine, I think, is 2.9 metres with all its equipment on board, and so therefore I don't think it would be able to access it. So I would let you have a very small fire tender, yes, but not a normal one to fight fires. So I would disagree actually with that. But anyway,
I'll just go to the local.
Yeah.
Normally, as he originally mentioned that.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading from MT1, Section 4. Ensure that developments are designed and laid out to achieve safe entrance and exit, have appropriate operational and manoeuvring space, accommodate provision for all modes of transport, the needs of people with disability, and provide safe access for the emergent services. I think that section is at least called into question.
Yeah.
So our advice to you is that we do not believe that we should be advancing reason for refusal on grounds of MT1. There are, as you said, a raft of other reasons for refusal that have been put forward as part of the recommendation, which are more subjective and are matters that, you know, you've got very detailed within the report. Our recommendation, we wouldn't be advancing the reason on MT1. I understand the concerns, but I don't think, given the advice that you've had, that you should be doing that.
Okay, I'll withdraw that one.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other speakers? Officers wish to make any comments before we move to summing up by the local member?
I just want to clarify, so we have included the lack of the assigned section 106 as part of that recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think the other, just be mindful of, is that we do need to let that period of notice run before we can issue any decision on this, because we do need to let that run through.
Yeah. Right, and now I'll move to the local member to finally sum up, please.
Thank you, committee. I know this hasn't been an easy decision. As I said at the beginning, a lot of this is a fine balance on knife edge. I know it's been a very lengthy report to wade through. I'd like to compliment Josh on the extensive photographic evidence, many of which I think would make very suitable postcards for the TIC. But thank you very much. I'm completely in agreement with Councillor Simmons's proposal, or Councillor Thomas's. I'm not really sure who's going to take the credit, but thank you very much for your diligence and perseverance with this long and complex application. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll move to a vote. We have the resolution before us. Well, we don't have it before us, but we have a resolution. Can I ask for those in favour, please indicate. Those in favour of the resolution, that the refusal and the reasons for refusal. Those against? Two. Abstentions? That is carried. Now can we move on fairly quickly to the next item? Item 7. If we just a moment to change officers.
And local ward member as well.
Oh, yeah,
Local ward member. And, oh, I'll get those ones. Oh. Okay, if those present, if I can ask the public, if there are public speakers who are present for making... Mr. Saunders and Mr. Thomas. Mr. Saunders and Mr. Thomas, if you could take your seats at the application.
Mr. Thomas? Is there a Mr. Thomas?
Is there a... Yes, Mr. Thomas is there.
Mr. Saunders will be 1 minute.
One.
I think we will just have to wait for Mr. Saunders.
Yeah, we'll just wait for Mr. Saunders. take your seat, Mr. Saunders, at the table? Oh.
At the table? Yeah,
Oh.
who's got a piece of paperwork?
Thank you. Welcome. And I'll call you to speak when after the officer's presentation. This application is item 7, land north of Lee Hills, Bishop's Wood, Ross-on-Wye. I'll now move to Mr. Withers to make the officer's presentation.
Thank you, Councillor James. Good morning, everybody. Before I move on to my presentation, I just wanted to draw councillors' attention to the schedule of updates, where you'll see a recently received comment from the parish council in lieu of their inability to attend in person today. And there is also a clarification in there regarding the finished slab levels of the site, which was a point that was discussed at the site meeting yesterday. So moving on then, this slide, you'll see the application site is marked in the usual way with a red star. It's located within a cluster of existing properties at the eastern edge of Bishopswood, which is an identified settlement under policy RA2 of the core strategy. The River Wye and the village of Goodrich, respectively, are located approximately 300 metres and 1.5 kilometres from the site to the west, and Ross-on-Wye some 5 kilometres to the north. The site is wholly within the Wye Valley National Landscape, formerly known as the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, and members will recall, those who were at the visit yesterday, that there is a small area of unnamed ancient woodland at the western boundary of the site. Next slide, please, Kelly. So this top image, this slide identifies the red line boundary of the application site. Here we can see a little bit more the relationship the site has with the existing dwellings on both the north side and the south side of the highway, from which access to the site is derived. The lower image, I think, is helpful just to show and identify the wooded nature of the valley side within which the application site and the wider settlement of Bishopswood is located. Next slide, please. For the avoidance of doubt, the site is specifically allocated for housing within the Walford Neighbourhood Development Plan, with a notional target of 3 dwellings, and on this slide it's referred to as Wolf 21A. As I've said, it's on the north side of the highway. On the south side of the highway, you'll see another allocation, Wolf 21C, which has an extant planning permission for 3 dwellings, and members will have seen the activity on site yesterday as part of the implementation of that permission. In this context, the principle of residential development is clearly an established one, having been identified within an up-to-date neighbourhood development plan, which is less than 5 years old as we sit here today. Next slide, please. 2 4-bedroom dwellings are proposed, which will be positioned towards the northern boundary of the application site and on a similar level to the property known as Sunnyside, which you'll see marked in orange at the eastern boundary of the application site. In terms of the distances from the highway, Unit A is approximately 30 metres back from the roadside, and Unit B around 42 metres. Unit A would be approximately 24 metres from the nearest elevation of Sunnyside. Access to the site is derived from an upgraded existing field gate, such that no trees will be removed and the existing hedgerow need only be cut back a small amount in order to form the necessary visibility splays. The driveway will be approximately 8 metres wide at the splayed entrance and would be a shared one, and parking would be accommodated in carports to the side of the properties and in parking areas at the front of each unit. In terms of landscape mitigation, the development does not involve the removal of any trees, and only a limited loss of hedgerow, as I've said, at the access is required. In addition, orchard planting is proposed in the southwest corner of the site. A native species hedgerow will be planted along the southern edges of the shared driveways and along the western boundary of the application site, and the darker green dots on this slide show the individual native species tree planting that would be carried out across the site, and in particular a number of trees located between the Unit A and Sunnyside. Members will note from that the revised scheme continues to attract concerns from the Senior Landscape Officer, but also should be aware that the comments from the AONB unit within the report are now considered to be out of date, as these relate to the original proposal, and we've received no further comments from the AONB team in relation to this revised proposal. A surface water drainage basin or swale is located between the proposed dwellings and the roadside boundary. That's in the lighter shade of blue on the slide here. Members' attention is drawn to the response provided by our drainage colleagues, which continues to promote a below ground surface water strategy as proposed to the swale that is shown on this plan. But based upon these concerns, it is considered that the risk, whilst limited, is one that we need to secure control over, and a pre-commencement condition is recommended and has been agreed with the applicant. Foul water would be managed by a packaged treatment plant, and the soakaway drainage field for that part of the scheme is the slightly darker blue rectangle on the slide, and that is partly within the red line boundary of the application site, but largely on land also within the control of the applicant, so well within the compass of regulating through a condition. Next slide, please. Unit A is a 4-bedroom property with a floor area of 183 square metres, a ridge height of 7.2 metres, and a proposed slab level above the a ridge height of 7.2 metres above the proposed slab level, and an actual height above ground level of approximately 8.7 metres, allowing for the requirement to cut into the slope. Materials for both units are proposed to be a combination of stone cladding, charred and natural cedar cladding under a standing seam metal roof. It's not totally obvious from this slide, but the PEC line around the edge of the top left elevation there identifies what the originally submitted scheme was. So there has been a reduction in the height and slight reduction in the width of this particular unit. Next slide, please. Then Unit B now is effectively a handed version of Unit A, with the same floor area, same number of bedrooms, 4, same ridge height above the first floor level, but in this case would be a slightly higher above the new ground level, again allowing for the need to cut into the slope. Again, the PEC line on this slide shows the original dimensions of this unit, which has been quite significantly reduced in scale as a result of ongoing negotiations through the process. Next slide, please. So this slide demonstrates what's undoubtedly a significant slope across the site, and is obviously the main challenge in terms of successfully developing it. It's perhaps worth noting here again that the blue lines shown on these slides indicate the extent of the originally proposed development, which in its original form included quite large and visually dominant terraces in front of both units. These have now been removed, and as a result the visual impact and scale of the units looking up the slope have been reduced somewhat. The first floor slab levels will be set at around 8.5 to 9 metres above the level of the highway, and the lower image there shows the location of the surface water swale in the area between the units and the southern boundary of the application site. Yeah, Kelly's just identifying that there. Next slide, please. And then finally, in terms of the application submission itself, this is a street scene to help contextualise the proposal, and which depicts the established woodland setting within which the site is located. So I'll just move on to the photographs now. So this slide highlights the existing field entrance, with the top left slide looking uphill, the top right slide looking down the hill, and the bottom image looking directly upslope of the highway. Unlike Josh, I wasn't brave enough to take some photographs yesterday, so these were taken on a rather nicer day in Walford. Thank you. Next slide, please. This slide seeks to demonstrate the residential context within which the site is located, with the top left slide being taken from the gated entrance looking up towards Sunnyside. The top right is a view from where Unit A would be sited, again with Sunnyside shown, and just beyond it you can see the property known as Old Leys. The bottom right is a view towards Old Chapel House, which is a large detached property located at a higher level and to the northwest of the site, and members who were at the visit yesterday saw a car using the lane which provides access to that property. Again, we weren't brave enough to trudge up the hill in the wind and rain. So yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. So yeah, the top left image seeks to highlight the wooded backdrop against which the site would be viewed. And the foreground, the bottom right is a slide looking back towards the property's sunny side there. You can just see in white, and then you can see the roofscape of a property known as Orchard Heights, which is located on the south side of the highway. Thanks, Kelly. Next slide. And then finally, the top two images here show the panoramic views from the site towards the River Wye, or over the River Wye, and towards Coppet Hill. And then the bottom slide there, I've just shown the existing access arrangements for Sunnyside and Old Leys. And I've included those just so that members can see how retaining walls and parking arrangements have been accommodated locally. So next slide. Finally then, in summary, the principle of development is supported by an up-to-date and local neighbourhood development plan policy, WOLF 21A. And whilst the steep slope of the site is undoubtedly a challenging one, it's considered that this revised proposal presented today represents an acceptable balance between delivering an appropriate design and scale of development on an allocated site and in an undoubtedly sensitive landscape. It's acknowledged that there will be a localised impact, particularly whilst the proposed landscaping proposals mature, but the retention of all of the existing vegetation that bounds the north, south and part of the western boundaries of the site will help mitigate this impact. The supporting documentation, in Officer's view, illustrates to an appropriate standard that within the wider landscape context, the development will be read as an acceptable extension to the cluster of existing dwellings that characterise this edge of Bishopswood, and which, aside from some widening of the gated entrance on the site, safeguards all of the mature landscaping that frames the site. Subject to the recommended conditions, there are no technical objections from a highway safety and drainage perspective, and the proposal has been demonstrated to mitigate the impact upon neighbouring properties and the nearby ancient woodland, and will have no likely significant effects on the River Wye Special Area of Conservation. As such, the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll move on to public participation. I'd ask for Mr. Evans to read a statement from Walford Parish Council, which has been provided by the clerk. Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Walford Parish Council wish to have the following areas of concern over the application considered by the Planning Committee. 1. Inadequate housing need. The proposed development comprises 2 large 4-bedroom dwellings that fail to address the identified local community housing needs outlined in the Walford Neighbourhood Development Plan and the Core Strategy. 2. Conflict with local character and landscape quality. The development is deemed incompatible with the local character and landscape quality of the area. It would negatively impact the appearance and setting of the rural landscape. 3. Inappropriateness of dwellings. The characteristics of the proposed dwellings, including their size, scale, massing and urbanising effects, are deemed inappropriate for the local vernacular of small wayside cottages and individual dwellings in the area. 4. Negative impact on surrounding views. The Principal Natural Environment Officer has expressed concerns that the proposed dwellings would stand out as negative features and exacerbate the incongruity of the development in surrounding views. 5. Driveway construction. Parish Council is concerned that the driveway now goes higher up the hillside and adds to the concerns it already has over surface water drainage. 6. Inadequate junction. In 2016, the Highways Officer reported that the junction to the lane was dangerous and substandard. While Council is awaiting the introduction of an experimental 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, which it is hoped will improve safety, 4-bedroom houses may lead to a disproportionate number of additional vehicles using the lane and junction. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll invite Mr. Saunders to speak in objection to the application. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Before I start, I'd like to thank the Chair and the committee for the opportunity to speak today. It's very much appreciated, and it's very much appreciated that you visited our lane yesterday in such awful weather. Thank you very much for that. A key requirement for both the core strategy and the Wolford Neighbourhood Development Plan is for any new housing scheme in this rural area to meet local housing community needs. These needs are clearly set out in the NDP based on the Council's own local housing market assessment. They indicate local housing need is overwhelmingly for small 2- and 3-bedroom dwellings and housing for the elderly. This proposal for oversized 4-bedroom dwellings would meet none of these needs. In fact, there is almost no identified local need at all, barely 5% for 4-bedroomed and larger dwellings. This is not a proposal that is designed to meet local community housing needs. It is a proposal designed to maximise the developer's profit at the expense of the local community, local character and landscape quality. We are told that the local area is particularly vulnerable to changes in character brought about the infilling of small plots, as is here. Above all, increasing urbanisation is identified as the greatest threat to local character. The proposal before you is exactly the kind of over-intensive urbanising development your own planning policies seek to guard against. Large suburban-style dwellings built up on rising ground as to appear extremely prominent. Your own Principal Natural Environment Officer agrees. She finds that the proposal would have moderate to major adverse effect, that the proposals would stand out as a negative features and would appear prominent and incongruous in its surrounding views. If the local character and the landscape quality are to be preserved, it is vital that these policies are enforced. Inappropriate and excessive development that harms local character must be resisted. The local adopted NDP and core strategy tried to strike a fair balance. They will not permit that fails to meet local housing needs, that fails to protect local character and landscape quality, that fails to preserve the scenic beauty of the AONB. That is the proposal before you. Local residents look to the Council to protect local communities, the environment and the landscape, to ensure planning policies are applied fairly and consistently. This proposal demonstrably fails to comply with those policies. We urge you to refuse this planning permission on the grounds that the development fails to meet the local community housing needs and would harm the character, appearance, setting and landscape of the local AONB. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I'll move on to Mr. Thomas to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. I speak in support of Freeman Homes' application for the erection of 2 dwellings on land at Leys Hill, Bishopswood, and endorse the officer recommendation to grant planning permission. The site is allocated for residential development by the Wolford NDP. The principle of development is not just acceptable, but is endorsed by the plan, which passed through 2 stages of public consultation, independent examination, and a referendum. The application is prepared in conjunction with landscape, drainage, ecology, and architectural specialists, resulting in a scheme for 2 dwellings, which was felt to be more appropriate than the 3 suggested by the allocation policy. This given the national landscape designation and concerns for the capacity of the local highway network that the applicants, as local residents, are familiar with. Following the initial submission, the applicants have further revised the scheme on the advice and feedback of officers and in response to other stakeholders, including the nearest neighbours. These amendments have combined to substantially reduce the scale of the dwellings, omit the undercroft parking, move the dwellings further from the boundary with Sunnyside, move the access away from the mature sycamore, and confirm, following a speed survey, that visibility displays are achievable as confirmed by the local highway authority. As a consequence, the Council's tree officer has no objections to the proposals, and there are no technical objections to the application that are not addressed by the suggested conditions. We note the Parish Council expressed support for the application as originally deposited at their meeting on the 22nd of February 24, and again for the first amended proposal on the 24th of April this year. We feel that the late submissions reported this morning are addressed by the further reduction in the scale of the dwellings as set out in the officer report. We feel that reference to the houses being large is not borne out by comparison to recent approved local developments. We have compared the gross internal areas of the amended scheme with 2 nearby sites on Leys Hill. The 2 houses proposed here are significantly smaller than houses approved on those sites. In respect of local services, there is the Village Hall, the Inn on the Wye and garage with shop at Bishopswood. There is a pub at Walford and employment sites locally too, including the nursing home at Hazelhurst and Walford Timber. There is a footpath and bridleway network accessible at the rear of the site, offering pedestrian links, and Ross on Wye is within easy reach. We believe the application as amended, and by proposing fewer dwellings than the allocation policy suggests, demonstrates sensitivity to the landscape, neighbours and the highway network. In common with your officers, we believe the development on an allocated site is compliant with the development plan, whereby planning permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. If you can now take your seats back in the public gallery. Councillor Cole is the local member for the ward. He speaks now and has the at the end of the meeting of the debate, and he does not have a vote. He has a 10-minute time limit. Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Mr Withers for a very comprehensive report and all those that came to the site meeting yesterday. Walford 17 states the development should make a meaningful contribution to the housing needs of the community. They include 2- and 3-bedroom family houses and housing to meet the elderly. Our own strategy policy SS2 tells us that the housing development in rural areas must meet local needs. Policy RA2 of the core strategy goes to the heart of the matter. Bishopswood is one of the settlements listed under policy in figure 4.15, where housing is appropriate, but only where it contributes to the social well-being of the settlement. The Council's own housing marketing assessment in Table 1 states specifically the proportion of houses required by size. We know that 24.3 of market housing needs to be 2-bedroom dwellings. To meet our local needs, we know that 63.2 market housing needs to be 3-bedroom and only 5.1 to be 4 bedrooms or larger. There is no local need for housing of this type and size. This proposal fails to meet the local community housing needs. It fails to comply with policies under the NDP and our core strategy. Because it fails to comply with these policies, planning permission should not be granted. Policy WALF2 states that the character of the landscape setting of the settlement must be preserved. Policy WALF4 gives particular weight to maintaining and reinforcing the special landscape character of the AONB. Policy RA1 is specifically concerned to avoid unnecessary isolation on character dwellings, which would adversely affect the character and setting of the settlement in their local environments. RA2, development must be appropriate to the local context and make a positive contribution to the surrounding environment and its landscape setting. Policy SS6 emphasises the need to protect environmental quality and local distinctiveness. Policy LD1 is particularly concerned to conserve and enhance the natural scenic beauty of the AONB. This application does not. According to the landscape character assessment, the local area is vulnerable to change in character brought about by already built developments, including the infill of small plots. Increase in urbanisation identified as the greater threat to that character. We have a scheme for 2 large urban-style dwellings built upon rising ground and have the appearance of 3-storey houses. Given them unwarranted prominence and domineering presence to the wider rural landscape. The scheme dominates the hard surface and car parking, which have 2 new dwellings entirely out of scale with the character of with the local dwellings, is clear conflict with the adopted policies of the NDP and core strategy. The Council's principal natural environment officer agrees. It is their carefully considered professional opinion that the proposed dwellings would be perceived in the area as being 3-storey, and their mass would be considerably larger than the other properties in the surrounding area, finding moderate to adverse effects. They would stand out as negative features, whilst the elevated ground levels on site would exacerbate the prominence of the proposed development in the surrounding views. We have a proposal that fails to meet the local housing community housing needs as required by the local adopted planning policy. We have a proposal that would harm the local character and landscape quality in direct contravention of those same policies. The provision of 2 oversized urban dwellings have no positives to alter us in terms of local housing need and local landscape character. Nothing would within our local adopted planning policies indicate that we should accept such a compromise. I urge the committee to refuse planning permission on 2 counts. Number 1, the proposed development fails to meet the local community housing needs as required by policies SS2 and SRA2 of the core strategy and policy WALF 17 of the Walford Neighbourhood Plan. And the second one is the proposed development, by reason of its size, scale, bulk and adverse urbanisation effect, would harm the character, appearance and landscape setting of the local area and the scenic beauty of the AONB, contrary to policies SS6, RA1, RA2 and LD1 of the core strategy and WALF2 and WALF4 of the neighbourhood planning development plan. Thank you very much. I welcome the debate.
Thank you. And now I'll move to the debate. Councillor Foxton.
Sorry. Thank you for the detailed presentation from Mr. Withers. There are linear sporadic settlements along Lees Hill with an eclectic mix of character houses. Lees Hill is fairly steep and narrow, and all properties appear to have steep driveways. I suspect 2 more houses make very little difference to the road. I can't see affordable houses being appropriate for the hill. The 2 detached properties would have car parking, sufficient on-site turning provision, adequate visibility displays and drainage infrastructure. Only minimal hedgerow removal is needed for visual displays for on-site access. Houses are dotted either side of the hill. There's ample space for development of 2 houses in this location. The initial proposal has been revised significantly, reduced in overall scale and footprint. The revised proposal includes a reduction in ridge height, a decrease in the overall width of each dwelling by around 5 metres, therefore more in keeping with the surrounding landscape. Walford Parish Council have requested various things, including no external lighting to minimise lighting spill. The proposed properties are in the Wye Valley Dark Skies area, hence there's a restriction on external lighting, including no driveway illumination. The existing topography orientation and landscape through planning guidance is in keeping with the neighbouring properties on the hill. Now, the weather was particularly wet yesterday and stormy, and it gave us a very realistic view of the site. And I look forward to hearing the debate. Thank you.
Sir Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the case officer for taking us out to site in those atrocious conditions and also navigating the very large delivery vehicles taking materials to the site further down the road that we had to navigate. I do feel for the residents with the cumulative development that's occurring along there potentially if this is approved. I have got concerns about this. I appreciate that the site is allocated within the Walford Neighbourhood Development Plan and that carries material weight. I do feel that it doesn't, as has been pointed out, very last gasp by the Parish Council and by the ward member today, that it doesn't conform with their policy 17 paragraph H for 2 and 3 bedroom houses. This is for 2 4-bedroom houses, but it is acknowledged that it is 2 properties rather than 3 within that site. My real problem with this application is that since the NDP and since our core strategy policies were made, LURA, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, has put additional emphasis and weight, I feel, on that great weight should be given to the national landscape and the consideration of development in the national landscape. I feel that there have been attempts to reduce the scale and improve the facades, including reduction of glazing, including the materials. I am really pleased to see that. But I do note within the LVIA that accompanied the submission of the application documents that it didn't, for example, have a viewpoint from Coppet Hill, the actual main path up to the trigger point on Coppet Hill. And that slope of Lees Hill is really visible from there. You can see some of the sort of white cottages and style there. I think introducing the driveways and the vehicles into that field will increase the reflective surfaces and detract from the setting of the national landscape. And therefore, I am really struggling to support this on the grounds of Walford Parish 17, particularly paragraph H, RA2 and paragraph 189 of the National Planning Policy Framework. I'd just like to hear more from the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank Simon Withers for his report and for showing us around the site visit yesterday. Lots of fun in the rain. It was interesting to note the development sites surrounding this application site. A couple of them to the south of the site down the hill seemed to be extremely large footprints. I think they would be much larger than the 2 we're looking to determine today. This is a large site and with just two dwellings upon it, 2 family houses. I think it's an ideal site for them. How the builders decide to develop them, digging them into the slope, how the driveways will work, but they work at other properties close by, so there's not a problem with that. Some concern was expressed yesterday about light pollution coming from the glass frontages of these two properties. That's a bit of a prediction, really. I mean, it's difficult to know what sort of light pollution will emanate from these places. We won't really know until they're built. But of course, the site is completely surrounded by trees, and I think in the summertime, when the trees are in leaf, you won't be able to see these houses at all. We've had 2 reports within Mr. Withers' report from the Parish Council in support of this application. First one was last year, February, and the other one was April this year, and now we've had another one read out to us this morning. Which ones do we believe? But my view is we had to read this report and accept what was written in there, with 2 supporting reports from the Parish Council. It's difficult to use the objection this morning. And with all that in mind, I feel I should support the officer recommendation for approval.
Thank you. I just say I also have some difficulty of the position of Walford Parish Council, which have voted twice to support it, and now put in a rather, which doesn't seem to have been voted on. So I'm afraid I've got to be very sceptical about that. Can I now move on to Councillor Thomas?
What about these properties? Wrong properties in the wrong place. That's probably nothing we can define. The original requirement was, I believe, 3, which would be far better for the community. And the design of these properties will totally overstate Sunnyside, I believe, which is white. These properties are going to be dark, which seems to be everywhere we go and every planning we get now. We got this very dark cladding as well as ugly stone. I don't think there are many stone houses. Most of them have been rendered over and painted white, and that's traditional of the Wye Valley, as Councillor over there stated. On Coppet Hill, they're nearly all white. I do have a problem with these. I'm going to listen to what everybody else is going to say first. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. It was an interesting site visit, as I say, again in the pouring rain and the wind. But I did, first and foremost, this site has been allocated for housing, so we have to accept that basic fact. And I did notice on the drive up Leys Hill that many of the properties seemed very substantial detached properties in their own grounds. And in fact, the house next door to the proposed site seemed to be a very large house, again in its own grounds. So this appears to be the size of development on Leys Hill. And I must say I wouldn't like to go up that road in icy weather. And I did admire the lorry driver who backed down it for at least 200 yards because of the traffic congestion caused by our site visit. But I think we have to accept this application. So I will move in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Is that seconded so that we can? All right, that sounds. Right, we'll move on to Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Planning Officer for the presentation, very concise, and thank you for all the other input. As this is an allocated site, I think that takes a lot of weight of responsibility, and also the fact that the size and scale of these properties has been addressed and reduced during this process, showing that the developers are intent to try and assist the local community in when they have raised concerns about the development and have listened to them and have acted accordingly. The fact that there was a potential for 3 properties on this site and it's been reduced to 2 is also beneficial as far as weight of traffic for the road and the highways and the amount of journeys coming in and out, which will always be a bone of contention because we have the 2 sides to it. If we had 3 smaller properties, we'd have potentially more weight of traffic.
and consequently with only having 2 properties it'll reduce that, giving better access for local communities and local residents. I therefore support this application for the officer as made. Thank you.
Right. Any other speakers? Councillor Ingle.
Thank you, Chair. If you've been to Switzerland, you might have noticed that they have a gift for placing buildings on hills and mountainsides that look as though they were what nature intended. This has not been a gift characteristic of Herefordshire necessarily. And this national landscape is the nearest we have to Switzerland, and you could see that even through the murk from Lays Hill. I think the gradient of this field is way too high to be a satisfactory place for housing in this landscape, and it's going to be a hell of a mess, particularly if you're going to have any more lorries coming up that hill doing 17-point turns, and it's really bleak. If we can't protect the national landscape, and the houses aren't going to go to local people, more likely weekenders in that place, I really don't know what we can protect. Thank you.
I would remind members we're a planning committee. Right. Councillor Simmons and then Councillor Woodwell. Sorry, Councillor Simmons first, because you haven't spoken yet. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, navigating that road yesterday was hazardous, and we sort of considered it is distracting to see the existing construction that's going on. Do we encourage additional construction and get it all over with in one horrible 5-year period, or will this come up again in the future and then more construction can sort of exacerbates the area? But one thing that was mentioned that really sort of struck me was this housing, they need housing for local people. The trouble with the housing market, as we know, is you can't tell people who's going to buy it. You can't say, oh, so-and-so's, wants to buy that house, so-and-so wants, unless it's a self-build, unless it's something on like a rural property or a farm, unless we know for sure. So this whole idea and this whole argument from the parish council that it's not suitable for local use, I don't think that's backed up by the way people behave. Thank you.
Yes, and I totally agree. Mr. Withers, do you want a couple of points before I come to Councillor Simmons? You wanted to raise?
Just a couple of points, really. No questions have come, but I thought I'd clarify a few points. Firstly, in relation to Councillor Simmons's comment about the information within the landscape and visual impact assessment, I accept that point. There isn't a viewpoint provided from Coppet Hill, but there is, in my view, a pretty representative one from Thomas's Wood, immediately opposite the application site on the other side of the village. And I think that does, I don't think that hides away from the fact that the site will be visible in public vantage points from across the valley. The point I suppose I wanted to make is that it would be seen as part of a cluster of buildings at this end of Bishop's Wood. In relation to Councillor Thomas's point, again, render would probably be a more prominently visible material when viewed in those longer distance views, and accepting that it is a contemporary design, the use of stone cladding and timber cladding and a well-chosen metal clad roof would, in my opinion, result in a more recessive appearance, less prominent in the landscape. And then I suppose the point that's probably already been made but and accepted is that the development that's happened adjacent to the site, notwithstanding the fact that this scheme has been reduced quite a lot in terms of its overall scale, but by comparison, those developments that have permissions and are being implemented are somewhat larger in footprint than the scheme we're looking at today. So I just wanted to make those points. I think the debate has kind of considered those points in any event, but I didn't want to leave that left unsaid. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of come back on some things that have been said and just prompt me. Firstly, yes, there are larger developments going ahead, but for me, that means it's even more important that the 2 and 3 bedroom scale properties have space within the allocation. And if we're allowing all of these allocated sites within the plan to be built out at the maximum quantity, that doesn't comply with 17 and the percentage scale of 4 bedroom properties that should be brought forward. However, I appreciate that point may have been moved on from by the committee. I would just like to point out that we've got indicative landscape cross sections and plans here. So my concern, and I think it was raised by the landscape officer, relating to the swale being quite a visible feature. And obviously in the plan, it's just seems to be a dug out section. I just want to make sure that if this was approved at the end of this discussion, that there isn't kind of big retaining walls built to create a kind of more cosmetic pond, and that this retains and follows the topography of the slope, understanding water levels and hydraulics, that the back of the pond will likely, or swale, will have a big slope rather than some sort of gabiioned large infrastructure kind of approach. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I did seek some assurance from the applicant yesterday in relation to the strategy and what led to the design of the swale that we've got. I'm reassured that what's set out on that plan is quite significantly over-engineered in terms of what is necessary to mitigate the surface water from the development. So I think that is a realistic prospect, and we should expect to see something that doesn't result in bunds and more unnatural looking elements in that landscape.
Right. Can I say just a comment on that? Councillor Woodall's comments, I think, were very pertinent. The fact that, we can talk about local need, we can talk about affordable, but in the end, it doesn't mean that happens even if we put 2 bedroom houses here, because it's more likely that they might become weekend properties, that sort of thing. So it's the devil you do and the devil you don't. The situation. But anyway, are there any other speakers before I go? None? Then I'll go. Officers, if they want to say any further comments? Then I'll go to the local member. Can sum up?
Thank you, Chair. Today, the evidence presented clearly demonstrates a significant gap in the understanding when it comes to addressing local housing needs. The proposal overlooks the established policies and disregards the natural landscape. The construction of these 2 large houses is unnecessary, is neglecting the well-being of the community and the local biodiversity. There simply isn't a need. I urge that this proposal to be rejected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'll move to the vote. We have the resolution as outlined in the papers. I don't think there were any suggestions of amendments to that. Then can those in favour of the application, the officer's recommendation as in the report? Thank you. Those in favour, please.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favour.
Those against? 2 against. 2. And that is carried. I now call for a 2-minute break, comfort break for members. I can see the desperation on their faces. Thank you. Welcome back to the Planning Committee meeting. We now move on to the third application, which is 30 South Street, Herefordshire. Proposed change of use. Can I ask that the speakers present for that, public speakers, please take their places at the seats. Ms Hannah, who speaks on behalf of Leominster Town Council, and Mr Peach, the applicant's agent. I'll ask you to speak after the officer actually does their presentation. Anyway, Mr Dyer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon now, members. Before I start, I just want to draw your attention to the update sheet, which two updates received earlier this week. Number one, amends condition 8 within the officer's report to address a minor inconsistency with the proposed site plan and the landscaping scheme. So condition 8 now requests a landscaping scheme to be forthcoming, to be discharged as a condition. And I also note that members received a briefing note and good neighbour document from the applicant. That's been seen by officers, doesn't change my recommendation, and officers are of the view that doesn't actually have any material impact upon the planning application. So the application before members here is located in Leominster Market Town and shown by the red star on the map. The application seeks full planning permission for the change of use of 30 South Street, Leominster, and its associated curtilage from a sui generis use as a bingo hall to a Class E (B) / sui generis use and associated works to facilitate the conversion and subdivision into 2 hot food takeaway units. For the avoidance of doubt, Class E (B) is defined in legislation as the sale of food and drink, principally to visiting members of the public, where consumption of that food and drink is mostly undertaken on the premises. The statutory development plan consists of the MADE Leominster Neighbourhood Development Plan and the Herefordshire Local Plan Core Strategy, together with the National Planning Policy Framework. Next slide, please, Cal. The application site is shown by the red star on the map and is located within the central shopping and commercial area of the town, defined in policy LANP 6 of the Leominster NDP as a town centre location. The site also falls within the Leominster Conservation Area. Next slide, please, Cal. The application site is a former cinema and most recently bingo hall, located adjacent to the roundabout junction between South Street and Westbury Street. The site itself comprises the historic Art Deco frontage onto South Street, main red brick building and car parking to the west of the main building. Adjacent to the west of the site is the entrance/exit to the cooperative food store, public car park, several commercial and/or residential units, and the town's bus station. Opposite the site lies a bus stop and Aldi food store, and to the north lies private amenity space for the units further north along South Street. Next slide, please. For the benefit of those who aren't familiar with the site, the top photo is taken from Westbury Street opposite the bus station, showing the west and south elevations of the existing building and car park area. The bottom photo is taken from South Street roundabout, showing the Art Deco frontage. Before moving on, I'd just like to point out that the proposed changes to facilitate this change of use propose no works to the Art Deco frontage as shown on the proposed Elevation A drawing, also on the slide. Next slide, please. The south elevation along Westbury Street proposes to block up an existing doorway, together with the creation of 6 new glazed openings, as shown on the bottom drawing. The placement of such retains brick detailing within this elevation, which was requested by the Council's Built Heritage team. Above these is an area labelled signage zone. Officers advise that this element requires separate advertisement consent before being implemented. Further along, partial demolition of the west elevation of the building is proposed and indicated by the purple dashed line. Next slide, please, Cal. So the demolition of a portion of the west elevation facilitates the formalisation of this elevation as the main entrance to the two units. As shown, the demolition is proposed to facilitate new entrances to include double height glazing in bronze powder coated frames. And again, the signage zones are for illustration only. Next slide, please, Cal. So in the north elevation, the purple dashed line shows again the extent of the demolition on the far right-hand side, together with several openings being closed off in a brick sample to match the existing. The existing smoking shelter is also proposed to be removed, and above that is the proposed extract duct. The north elevation will also see the introduction of a new service door with external ramp, together with improvements to the existing door, which are both at ground level. Next slide, please. The focus for the application is primarily on the ground floor, with this being split into two units of Class E (B) use, with the first floor usage not yet prescribed. The larger unit proposes an approximate 250 square metre restaurant, which equates to 50 covers, as shown on the site plan, and the smaller unit approximately 131 metres squared, which has no stated number of covers yet. Next slide, please. The proposal seeks to formalise the existing car park to facilitate 12 car parking spaces, 2 disabled car parking spaces and 8 secure cycle parking spaces, together with widening the existing vehicle access and consolidation of the border planting around the parking area. Having regard for the principle of development, policies SS5, LO1 and E1 of the core strategy, and policies LANP5 and LANP6 of the Leinster NDP are most relevant, together with the MPPF. As per paragraphs 6.1 to 6.10 of the committee report, officers consider the proposal to accord with the principles set out in these policies. Appendix 3 of the Leinster NDP identifies cinema/bingo halls as community facilities, and so policy SC1 and LANP12, which seek to protect community facilities, are also relevant. The planning statement submitted with the application addresses this tension with policy, as summarised in paragraph 6.13 of the committee report, stating the building was last used as a bingo hall in September 2022 and marketed as such until March 2024, with no interest within that period from cinema or bingo operators. Next slide, please. As set out in the report before members, the main issues raised during the consultation period include the principle of development, public health, highways, public and private residential amenity, air quality, and the tree preservation order, as well as those on the update sheet. Next slide, please. So during consultation, a number of representations were received in relation to the proximity these two units would be from 3 nearby schools. The Leinster NDP or core strategy do not specifically address this issue, nor have either published supplementary planning documents or evidence bases to consider such matters. However, paragraph 97 of the MPPF, which is replicated on the screen, together with planning practice guidance, is material and states the following. Local planning authorities should refuse applications for hot food takeaways and fast food outlets, A, within walking distance of schools and other places where children and young people congregate, unless the location is within a designated town centre, or in locations where there is evidence that a concentration of such uses is having an adverse impact on local health, pollution or antisocial behaviour. As set out on slide 1, the application site lies within a designated town centre as per policy LANP 6 of the Leinster NDP. Next slide, please. During the consultation process, the local planning authority's highways team, as well as a number of representations, expressed concerns over the highway safety and traffic management in relation to the access and parking arrangements. As such, the proposal brought forward now limits parking facilities to members of staff and delivery drivers only. Conditions 7, 9, 11 and 12 in the officer's report are intended to control the implementation of the access arrangement, parking provision, together with service deliveries and full details of the secure cycle storage. Importantly, the building has an existing lawful use as a bingo hall, which is considered able to accommodate over 100 visitors at any one time, which is the context in which the proposed change of use and the appraisal of likely impacts should be made. On that basis, together with the information provided to date, and with the recommended conditions set out in the officer's report, officers consider the application to maintain highway safety and traffic management, and the application located in an inherently sustainable location. Next slide, please. No. The application has the potential to also have an adverse impact on the neighbouring public and private residential amenity due to noise, light, smell and litter, of which concerns have been raised during consultation. The proposal has also been appraised by the Council's Environmental Health, Noise and Nuisance team, who support the application subject to conditions securing an environmental noise management plan, extract duct details, litter management plan and pest control management plan, as set out in the officer's report. In addition to this, the proposed openings in the south elevation and west elevation are not considered to result in overlooking or light spill into private residential amenity space or adversely impact upon public amenity. Together with a restriction on opening hours as set out in condition 10, officers consider the proposal retains existing private, residential and public amenity. Next slide, please, Cal. The application site lies approximately 130 metres away from the Bargates Air Quality Management Area. The Council's Air Quality Environmental Health Officer requested further information in regard to vehicle movements in particular in relation to the Air Quality Management Area. However, on the basis the application represents a commercial use within the designated town centre, together with the existing lawful maximum capacity of the bingo hall, and a restriction on the use of the parking provision to staff and delivery drivers only, further investigation and reporting regarding air quality was not considered proportional in this instance. Next slide, please. The Council's tree officer consultation response sets out previous planning history on the site prior to the sale of the building to remove a copper beech tree in the southwest corner of the site indicated by the blue star. This planning history came with a condition securing a replacement tree within 2 years of the date of consent, which was in March 2017. This has yet to be replaced. However, officers advised that the site plan indicates that space is available for a replacement tree of the type specified to be provided. However, this remains a separate issue and does not constitute a material planning consideration for the appraisal of this planning application. The Council's tree officer has been notified of the outstanding condition and did not highlight any further tree constraints at the time of their consultation response. So to conclude, the application before members constitutes a change of use of an existing dilapidated building and its associated curtilage from a sui generis use to a Class E(B)/sui generis use, and works to facilitate the change of use within the defined town centre of Leominster. Having regard for the amended plans and information provided, together with the recommended conditions, officers consider the application accords with relevant statutory development plan policies and accordingly recommend approval with the conditions set out in the officer's report and the update sheet. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. And now we move on to public speakers. There was a late application on behalf of Leominster Town Council, and I've used my discretion to allow the representative of the Town Council to speak at this meeting. Can I now ask the speaker, Ms Hannah, to speak on behalf of Leominster Town Council, please?
I'm the chair of the Planning Committee. Thank you for hearing me. Leominster Town Council is grateful that this application has been called in. Our objection to the application was not unanimous. Since we gave our opinion, much more information has become available, and we would now like to add the following. As said, the building is a prominent landmark at the entrance to the town centre and the conservation zone. Our council is very keen for it to be used and well maintained. Our neighbourhood plan recognises the building as a community facility, which should, if possible, be retained as such. However, we accept that there has been no commercial interest in using the building for the community. We welcome very much the proposed planning conditions, especially those relating to parking, deliveries, nuisance and environmental issues. We had 3 grounds of objection. Traffic. Our objection raised concerns about traffic and pedestrian safety. In May, Highways remained unconvinced on safety. They did not accept that school children would use a nearby Pelican crossing. We have seen many children take the dangerous direct route at the busy junction. Highways later amended their opinion when the applicant agreed not to provide any customer parking. But the proposed planning conditions for traffic do not deal with pedestrian safety. Our council considers that one of Highways' objections still holds, namely that there is a clear pedestrian safety concern that must be taken into account. It has not been, and if permission is given, we hope the committee will impose further conditions that improve pedestrian safety. Second, proximity to 3 schools. The Town Council remains concerned that a large fast food outlet will be an unhealthy temptation to children from the 3 nearby schools, but understands that paragraph 97 of the NPPF cannot apply because the building is within a designated town centre. But central Leominster is an area of severe multiple deprivation and already has at least 8 fast food outlets. Preservation of the Art Deco features. The proposal effectively reverses the approach to the building so that the current rear wall will become the main entrance. The most important existing feature of the building will apparently be unseen and unused. The National Cinema Theatre Association has praised the current entrance, a circular foyer, and says it is rare and said its rare and original pay kiosk is outstandingly important. They asked that the kiosk be conserved. This request does not seem to have received a response. If approved, we hope the committee will add a condition about the kiosk. Thank you.
I'll now move Mr. Peach, the agent's applicant, for the applicant to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the Chairman for the opportunity to speak. I wasn't actually planning to speak because until 20 minutes ago I didn't realise somebody would be speaking in opposition, but so please excuse me if I'm a little bit jittery. What I would say to you is a chart surveyor. I've been working for over 30 years in the fast food industry, KFC, McDonald's, Burger King. Gerard Nicholas is the only person from that industry I work with now because he's an inspirational person. His belief in, he lives locally, and his belief in maintaining buildings and enhancing them is amazing. In terms of the property he owns in Cheltenham, second oldest properties in Cheltenham, Tewkesbury, etc. So you can rest assured that this building will be looked after. He has already said to me and wanted me to reassure about the pay kiosk in the lobby area, that will be protected and ideally a home found for it elsewhere in terms of a museum, which he will obviously pay for in terms of relocation. In terms of the entrance feature, this is not turning its back on the town centre. Quite the opposite. That deco frontage will be maintained, and it will, as and when Gerard finds a first floor use, will be brought back into use. this again demonstrates his confidence in the town. He doesn't have, we haven't looked, it would fall to me to find a second use for the ground floor ancillary unit and the first floor, and I've not even been instructed to look yet. That's because KFC will drive the regeneration of this building and the maintenance and the preservation of it, and it will stimulate walking custom, trade, link trips with the bus stop, and even provide, dare I say, a waiting room for the bus station. In terms of things like the bus stop, the pedestrian barriers, there are bus stops along South Street. I don't know. We have looked. We've considered. Could we put barriers in? It's pointless doing it because you will not stop children crossing between in the bus pulling areas. For example, you could condition it, but what purpose is it going to serve? They'll either vault the barriers or walk between the gaps. And the I don't have time to go into the whole argument about nutrition and fast food, but if children are determined, they will walk to a petrol filling station or a town centre shop and buy their crisps and pop. I'm afraid that KFC is regarded as almost kind of the Antichrist in these matters, as is McDonald's and everybody else. And I'm afraid that argument, KFC is a good choice. If you're going to have fast food, then basically they're the gold standard in terms of food being cooked fresh on the premises, etc. I think I've probably said enough there. We feel passionate about this. Drive-through is the asset that most brands would want in this town. McDonald's, I know, had been looking for years.
I'm going to ask you to finish now. We've done
Okay,
3 minutes.
So town centre is where basically it's a sustainable location, and please support the application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we'll now move on to the local member and the adjoining member. Councillor Woodhull is I believe, the local member for this particular application.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Leominster South Ward, and to Mr Dyer, the case officer, for his thorough work on this application. For most of us, this is about saving a prominent historical building in Leominster from inevitable decline and dilapidation. The fact that it will be converted for use as a hot food takeaway with interior dining provision is almost incidental. We need not only save this landmark building from neglect, but also attract new business and employment to Leominster, increase footfall to the town, and provide third places for the youth of Leominster to have the opportunities for social engagement in a safe and comfortable environment. This development could do all these things, but at what cost? I have read the comments, many comments, which is part of the reason why this was called in. Many people are in support, but those against are concerned about an increase in traffic, in litter, in vermin attracted to food waste, in noise and odours, and perhaps most importantly, on the impact to the dietary health of the customers. Herefordshire's Environmental Health Office have been consulted on this application, and whilst recognising the validity of the public concerns, they accept that mitigation in relation to noise, odour, litter and vermin can overcome them. Conditions include, and I'm sorry, Mr Dyer, you've already mentioned these, but it was the environmental noise survey with appropriate mitigation, providing details of the mechanical units, especially the ventilation and odour filtration system, and a litter and pest control management plan. It cannot, however, mitigate for the concerns raised about the dietary effects of the food being sold. Herefordshire's own public health vision, through its Food Alliance initiative, is a thriving and sustainable local food environment which contributes to a healthy lifestyle, healthy communities, and healthy environment. We should be working to help reduce the incidence of obesity and diet-related ill health in this county. However, as we all have, we've recently received assurances from the applicant that this fast food franchise is actively developing a healthier menu, which is encouraging considering the number of school children who could be passing this corner of the town. However, we already have the nearby supermarkets selling packs of 6 donuts for £1.50, or a box of 6 mince pies for £1. But to be fair, like the takeaway, they also sell salad. Other takeaways within short walking distance are selling fast food, but do not have the draw that this large venue will command. However, like them, this building is in the town centre and therefore exempt from restrictions relating to the distance from schools. The highway engineer's report has resulted in getting the use of the car park changed in order to reduce the hazards of increased traffic movements in this short section of road, which has so much activity. Between the two mini roundabouts, and we saw a picture of it, this is called Westbury Street, has 2 large supermarkets with car parks, a puffin crossing, a zebra crossing on a roundabout, the town bus station, a cafe, a private health centre, and a small grass space with benches. So traffic is already very slow moving on that section of road, and drivers should be and will be aware and alert for pedestrians. I wonder, however, what impact the delivery service providers will have on our pavements nearby. So we are told that the small car park will not be used for customer parking, and no deliveries or servicing activity are to take place on the public highways, including any laybys. This may present a challenge for our civic enforcement officers. I hope they will be alert to the additional monitoring that will be required. I am also concerned for the possible noise disturbance to residential neighbours in Carl Davis House opposite and the private homes between this old cinema and the Talbot Hotel. Servicing and resupply deliveries overnight could cause considerable noise disturbance because of lorries unloading in the car park area and the use of roll cage trolleys trundling up and down the ramp to the new service door, which we saw was on the northern side. If appropriate, could this committee recommend some form of nighttime delivery restrictions, for example between 12 AM and 7 AM, to reduce the noise disturbance to nearby residents? I would ask the committee to consider how to include this as a possible condition for this application. When speaking to people in town, in cafes or the pub about this application, I've been surprised by the responses. Most of the youngsters I spoke to were okay with it and thought it would get more people into town. Older locals have fond memories and wished for the building to be put to some form of community use, but realise that no one has come forward to rescue it, and the councils, both town and county, would be unlikely to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money not only to buy it, but to upgrade the building for public use. They were also not sure what kind of public use would attract the numbers needed to sustain it. I have viewed the inside of the building on 2 occasions. First, I had the opportunity to inspect it when it was for sale and still fitted out as a bingo hall. It was in a sorry state. Once a thriving centre of community entertainment, it was a dilapidated echo of a glamorous past. In the front entrance, the Art Deco lobby with fittings and upstairs lounge bar was spoilt by the crumbling plaster, old carpets, damp brown stains from water ingress, and mouldy walls. This is not a listed building, but it is within the town's conservation area. In the main auditorium, all the old cinema chairs and screen were removed and had been converted into a hall with rows of bingo tables. The upstairs gallery or balcony area was curtained off. It still had its original but faded chairs and was being used as a dumping area for slot machines, a jumble of decorations, boxes of merchandise, curtains and equipment. The 1920s style wallpaper and plaster was pink and faded, stained with the water from roof leaks. It was like something from an old 70s disaster movie. It was such a pity, but such a huge space would be financially ruinous to restore to its former glory and far too expensive to heat at today's prices. I had a conversation with the man who ran the ticket booth for the bingo. He remembered being dropped off at the cinema as a kid for the Saturday morning cartoon special feature while his parents went into town. The owner has offered the ticket booth to be sold for charity, and the National Theatre Association has been trying to find it a home. Any funds from this would go to an official charity and not to the town council, I may add. On my second visit, with the owner's permission, I saw that the property was being gutted. The main hall had been stripped back to the brickwork. All furniture, plaster, offices, kitchen, bar and bingo stage were gone. Only the white-fronted entrance lobby, stairs and ticketing booth remained untouched. So this place is now well beyond restoration as a cinema or a community space. I'm encouraged that the white frontage and lobby areas will be preserved, along with the Art Deco stained glass windows, in compliance with Leominster's LANP 6. The proposed new windows on the southern wall are sympathetically designed to match and have been reduced in number to avoid defacing the patterned brickwork. I think this is the best we can hope for this building. 3 years have passed since its closure, and the deterioration of the exterior is already visible due to broken windows, damaged gutters and downpipes. People definitely do not want to see this prominent building fall into disuse like the nearby Royal Oak Hotel, whose sorry facade is a painful scar on the town and a sobering warning of what happens when we hold on too long and too tight to nostalgia. I look forward to hearing your debate on this application and hope for a decision which supports the regeneration of a historic building in the town centre, compliant with LANP 5 and P6 of Leominster's neighbourhood plan, saving a landmark building from decline and bringing it back into public use. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Councillor Woodall, just within time. And now I'll move to the adjoining member, Councillor Bartlett, to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Dyer for his presentation and my most eloquent colleague here. So I'm speaking as the adjoining ward member for Leominster East, which is also South Street, but just on the other side of the road because we're a very compact little town. So I'm actually opposite the old bingo hall. And this application before you, as we've heard, has caused a lot of interest in town, both positive and negative. There are a number of concerns about hot food outlets and having another one in town, but then there's also a lot of support for this one too. So I too am pleased to see that it has come to committee for its final determination. Personally, I can see positive and negative sides to the redevelopment of the site into a hot food outlet on the edge of town, because although not listed itself, this is an iconic 1930s Art Deco building, and it was the town cinema for many years. There had been a number of suggestions as to what the building could be used for, as we've heard, none of which have materialised. So I am very pleased that plans have been submitted that, if agreed, mean that it will not remain empty any longer. I'm to appreciate the removal of the proposed eastern windows from the plan, thus retaining the original decorative diaper tilework embedded in the brickwork of this facade. As we've heard, at the moment there are no plans yet for the foyer and the frontage facing onto South Street, and this is concerning, but probably outside of the scope of the application. But we've also heard that there will be further applications coming forward for the upstairs and the adjoining takeaway. So overall, hopefully within that, there's something that can be done to maintain the atrium and the frontage, look after it and make it a great feature for Leominster. We've heard the application's gone through a number of changes, much for the better, particularly removing customer car parking on safety grounds and conditioning noise like litter and pest control. However, I do have a couple of additional points that I want to raise. There are concerns about the delivery hours. In fact, thinking about it, I've probably got more concerns now than I had originally thought of when they were saying about nighttime deliveries. So the delivery hours are proposed in the car parking plan, and when we look at car park management plan, and when we look at paragraphs 28 to 30, they're actually extending these hours now from 9 a.m. in the morning cut-off overnight to an overnight to 11 a.m. cut-off, which those 2 hours alone are quite busy in the town. So, along with my colleague, I would ask that maybe the committee need to consider the delivery hours, because as they're set out for just night time, I'm not sure whether that's going to be an overall good idea. So Welsh Water's comments, they also advise that an adequate grease trap should be fitted in accordance with environmental health regulations and maintained thereafter to prevent grease entering the public sewage system. And at the moment, this is an informative at the bottom of the report and not a recommendation. And personally, I would like to have seen that be a recommendation, not just an informative. And it's really important as the building lies close to the major fluvial water and sewage water flooding hotspots on Worcester Road at the station end and the adjoining residential and industrial estates just to the bottom of town. So I would like the committee to consider that. And we've just heard as well about the beech tree, which I was going to reference that we needed to be replaced, and I'm very happy to see here that we are going to be looking at replacing, because it was a much loved tree with a TPO on it. So even if it's not one of the on-site trees, I would still love to see that beech tree is replaced even off-site, and that condition now is executed. And in paragraphs 3.8 and 3.9 of the planning statement, there is reference to exterior signage, and as we've heard, signage requirements are coming forward as separate consent in line with policy, neighbourhood plan policy, LAMP 6I, that signage, illumination and lighting should be kept to a minimum, and when used, make a positive contribution to the street scene. So I would ask that if committee are minded to grant planning permission, that we do maintain that this will be a further condition, that the signage will be sorted out before the building is opened. On balance, I think this application has addressed most of the planning concerns raised, and it does provide for a secure future for the use for this iconic building. There are still concerns about delivery times. So we've heard there's still concerns about another fast food outlet. Whichever way committee decide to determine this, it's not going to please everybody, but that's never possible to do anyway. So I look forward to hearing committee's deliberations on this. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Simmons.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to all the speakers. Right, where do we start? I'm really pleased that this is not a drive-through. I'm really pleased to see that it is bringing back into use an iconic building that is suffering decay, as we've heard. I have some substantial concerns, however, about some of the logistics around this site and its operation particularly. I note that in the transport plan attached, everything is talking about sustainable movement and people walking. However, consistently in all the plans, it's referred to as a drive-to. Although this parking, we're being reassured, is entirely for customer and, staff, thank you, and disabled. I would like to ensure that there is some sort of barrier then that's preventing people from driving in and out of there, stopping while someone runs in to get their delivery of whatever make or brand eventually takes in, although we have all had the branding sent through on everything, so I think we're quite clear. My concern about nighttime noise delivery. So it does say within the transport plan, as has been pointed out by the ward members, that it's for operation between, I think, 11 midnight and 11 or something. So that is entirely overnight deliveries. I would really not like to see any overnight deliveries because of the proximity of housing and residential amenity. Leominster is relatively quiet in the evenings. It isn't a very, very busy market town at night. It is quite tranquil. I appreciate there's a planning condition at number 3 for a nighttime noise assessment. We all know that delivery vehicles going in and out have banks reversing, beep, beep, this vehicle is reversing, which is intensely annoying when you live next door to those, and has been pointed out by the trundling trolleys. My issue is that I cannot see how during daytime hours, if that car park is in use, through the auto track that's being shown, how on earth they can get vehicles in and out safely with it having staff parking in there during the day. So I don't know how we address that point, but I think it is vital that both things are done, that they can get deliveries in and out of there during the day safely, and that there is no nighttime noise from reversing vehicles or noisy deliveries. I know what their preference is for, but we shouldn't be accepting things that just disrupt residential sleep amenity. I do think there is a real issue. We're being hamstrung by NPPF 97. Leominster has significant health inequalities, and there are, as much as the applicant's agent has gone on about, you can get good quality food from this developer, the fact is that they do a huge amount of marketing to attract young people to eat their food as opposed to any other in the area. And so, I really do take issue with the fact that people are free to choose. We see consistently health inequalities are exacerbated when people choose not just as a one-off. There's nothing wrong with the food, but there is an issue if you are only eating that food or eating lots of it, and the proximity of the schools is a real concern. But I appreciate we are completely hamstrung at the moment by the lack of supporting policy. I think with the landscaping scheme, well, there isn't a landscaping scheme. It's simply on condition 8. Can I just please, 30 seconds. It says a condition within the plans for 5-year replacement of any trees that fail within 5 years. Could we please have that extended to 15? Consistently, we find that they don't plant, nothing gets done with enforcement, and then we lose the ability to install that. And it's really important to the town that we have our green space. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Stone then.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got mixed views about this application, but I still think it can be further improved. And I very much agree with the comments that have been made by both the local members from Leominster and also by Leominster Town Council. It is good that this prominent building in the town centre will be used rather than just becoming derelict. It will save the building from further decline. It looks very sad seeing it sitting there when some of us could remember it being a cinema and a bingo hall. And it's a shame that people, in some cases, have got to go well outside Leominster for their weekly game of bingo. 7 miles, for instance, to Brimfield. But I realise times change. I'm not going to be an agony uncle, sort of telling people what they should or should not eat. You'll be relieved to hear, but would like to point out that there are 8 other outlets in the town and quite a number of supermarkets as well. So it's not as though there's a desperate need for these 2 hot food units. There are many other places you can go in Leominster. I'm concerned, as are the councillors who've spoken and the town council, about pedestrian safety. I agree that the traffic situation and car parking has been, to some extent, addressed, but I don't feel that pedestrian safety has been sufficiently addressed. It's a clear concern to many of us, and I feel that more conditions possibly could be put on this application. The other point I want to make is about the proximity to our local schools. It's within this easy distance of 3 schools, and Leominster is an area of multiple deprivation. I think that should be taken into account. Children inevitably will be attracted there. It will act as a magnet. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I think it's something we've got to take into account when we're all talking about diets and healthy eating and so on. So my final point, though, Chairman, is related to noise, smell and litter. To some extent this has been addressed, I agree. But to give you one example, when an outlet moved into the garage near the Solway Arms at Wooferton, there was an appreciable increase in litter in the neighbouring lanes. And I'm frequently having to pick up fast food packets and so on as you walk round, and bags of one sort or another. Because whatever the facility says, nevertheless, litter is dropped by people often from outside the area. So it will be an additional problem in Leominster if it's not thought about properly. So, Chairman, on balance, and it is a balance, I will probably today be voting against this application as it currently stands, but I will await to hear the views of other members first. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank Jack Dyer for his report, concise and accurate as usual. This, to me, is an ideal use of an old disused cinema. The applicants will be retaining most of the original Art Deco facade, which is to be applauded, and we've heard that the internal booking hall will somehow be dismantled and put in a museum, which is a great idea if it can be done. Fast food outlets are always a bone of contention. Everyone's got their favourites, and I understand that the KFC in Hereford is well used, and it has, as far as I know, a good reputation. There's been no other commercial plans submitted to use this building, and so by letting it go to fast food, I think is the best option that we've got at the moment. There's been concerns expressed about children from the local schools having to cross that busy road there to enter the site. That's a matter, I suppose, for education by schools and by their parents, and not giving them enough money to go and buy this stuff. I don't know, but it's tricky. But should it be a matter for the planning committee? I don't think so. There was an application site down in Ross-on-Wye for a McDonald's site, which we refused because of concerns about children. But that was, I think it was because vehicles were turning off the busy A40, which is a little bit different to South Street in Leominster. There's plenty of local car parks in Leominster itself. There's one actually at the back of this site at the Co-op and the old disused Talbot Hotel, which should avoid congestion and on-street parking. And I was encouraged to read that the internal car park will be for the business only. And as Councillor Simmons said, how can we legislate that that will only be used for them? I don't know. Again, I don't think that's a matter for us. I would like to see grease traps conditioned rather than just being informative, if that can be done. And I would support that there be no nighttime deliveries at that particular site. That a simple condition that happens at a lot of other sites. It's not unusual. But with all those in mind, I recommend that this matter supports the officer recommendation for approval.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I emphasise, I think, I won't repeat what everybody else has said on the subject of the reuse of the building, but a couple of practical comments. I think Councillor Bartlett noticed the grease trap. It's better control of the grease is absolutely necessary. Fast food establishments use a lot of cooking oil, and I'm sure all members would realise, certainly the Hereford City ones, that Commercial Road was closed fairly recently for 6 weeks, while fatbergs were excavated from both Commercial Road and Catherine Street. Yes, so it's essential that proper grease traps are in place. And also on the subject of nighttime deliveries, more long-serving members of this committee might remember the McDonald's in Belmont Road had nighttime deliveries. That is surrounded by accommodation. In the end, we had to stop them because of the noise and disturbance. So I feel that nighttime deliveries should be forbidden. There's no reason why they can't deliver sort of 8 o'clock or so in the morning. But certainly the noise of lorries and trolleys being brought backwards and forwards caused immense disturbance to local residents at McDonald's at Belmont. So I think we should learn from experience.
Thank you. Councillor Gennard.
Thank you very much. I am going to go back to this National Planning Policy Framework. I find it really difficult because Section 8 says promoting healthy and safe communities. Point 96 of the National Planning Policy Framework says that planning policies and decisions should aim to achieve healthy, inclusive and safe places. The next one, 97, is the one that we have heard that local planning authorities should refuse applications for hot food takeaways and fast food outlets. A, within walking distance of schools and other places where children and young people congregate, unless the location is within a designated town centre, which is what we have been told. But B says, in locations where there is evidence that a concentration of such uses is having an adverse impact on local health, pollution or antisocial behaviour. But in this case, I want to look at the health. Herefordshire has done some studies, and over 3 of the last 5 years, 2 different areas of Leominster had the highest proportion of overweight or obese children in both reception and year 6. And areas of Leominster have some of the highest levels of deprivation in Herefordshire, and that's within 10% of the most deprived areas in the whole of England. My question is, why is it up to us to prove with evidence that a concentration of such uses is having an adverse impact on local health? Should it not be up to the developers? I really don't like to speculate and sort of assume things, but if it is that the most deprived areas, and this is, again, it's studies throughout the whole of the UK, deprived areas are the ones that have double the fast food outlets of others. So it, you know, is there evidence? None that I've found specifically. But if we want to make a summation, then there is.
So I just would like some clarification from our transport officer and our case officer, how we reconcile, because I think we've all said we're concerned about nighttime noise deliveries, and I don't think any of us, if there is a recommendation to approve, it is on the basis that there are no nighttime deliveries. Therefore, how do they square the safe delivery during operating hours with the auto track showing? Does it mean that we therefore have to limit the opening hours to enable delivery prior to opening hours, which is not over nighttime noise? Thank you.
It is a difficulty because the delivery is reliant on using the car park that's designated for staff. So I think looking at the tracking, I think the only solution would be, because I think there's only about 2 spaces free once a delivery vehicle goes in and manages to turn around. So I think that one solution could be that staff can't park there and it is simply for deliveries, because that would also allow for the likes of Deliveroo and all the other delivery vehicles, which do cause problems on with these type of establishments. So we'd be keen not to exclude them. So I think potentially the only solution could be to not have staff parking in the car park, and it is simply a delivery car park. That could be a solution.
I think it's also worth noting that we've restricted at the moment hours of opening till 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. So if we said no deliveries between 11 p.m. and 7 in the morning, then there's a 2-hour slot there which could be reasonably managed. You know, it's an opportunity. We can take that away, and we can work that with the as part of the recommendation. We could take that away and discuss it with the applicant to see if that's something that is workable. It seems to me that I think somebody had mentioned it already, but it's an opportunity. People know when the least disruptive time to receive a delivery is, then they generally will do that anyway. So we could take that away as a recommendation to go back to the ward councillors to agree a delivery hours condition once we've had the opportunity to discuss it with the applicants. I think we did look at the other, operation sort of delivery hours on nearby supermarkets which don't have those restrictions. But we take on board what's been said in terms of the close proximity of the residential properties here, so we can take that away. I think that's a reasonable ask, and something we can take away and just agree that position. But I think if you can look at what times you think are reasonable, whether that is between no deliveries between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Is that what then that would be useful to clarify that as well. But before we can either impose that condition, or we can agree that we'll take that away to have the discussion with the applicants and then have a conversation with the ward councillors before we progress. Just whilst I'm here, yes, we can include an condition in respect of the grease trap and evidence of it being installed.
Councillor Andrews.
Kelly has just commented. I wanted a proper condition about grease traps put in to stop the accumulation of fatbergs. As I say, we have recently seen the problems in Commercial Road.
So,
Thank you, Chair. Particularly, I'd actually like to say thank you, Councillor Woodall, for that magnificent appraisal of the situation. It was really informative. I'm certainly in favour, and I think my balance has been thrown even more in favour by learning all that you had to say. Two conditions I think should be imposed. One, the grease trap, and the other regarding the nighttime delivery noise. I think they've probably both been covered now, but I'd like to add my sixpence behind them.
Councillor Simmons.
Just seeking clarification about the opportunity to extend the replacement of the planting that fails within 5 years, to extend that to 15 years.
If members want to include that as a recommendation, then yes. Just one other thing was I'm clarifying. If we are looking at hours of, as part of the proposal, hours of delivery condition, then options are we agree what the wording is now in terms of those hours, or if we do decide that we're going to take that away to have a conversation with the applicant, then it would need to be in consultation with the ward councillors, but with the agreement of the chairman. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that if the applicant comes back and disagrees with that, what remedy do we have if we've approved it as is?
It would be bring it back.
Bring it back, yeah. Right, we're moving towards... Can I just tell you one thing? I do think there's a lot of hypocrisy talked about fast food. I have to confess, I've never been inside a KFC in my life. I've led a very sheltered and life, but having said that, we have a KFC in Hereford, close to a Morrison's supermarket. And at various times of the day when I've been in Morrison's, the numbers of young people who've walked to the fast food department of Morrison's and are buying the most savoury foods I should think KFC's numbers pale in insignificance compared to those.
It's also the KFC is near the hospital.
Yes. And Morrison's sell Mars bars and everything you shouldn't.
Who's proposing?
Who is proposing? Councillor Baker and Councillor Thomas. Right. Will any officer comment before?
Just want to clarify, are we going with what the proposal was? Is it to include the condition that should be, or did you want to go back and have the conversation, or do you want us to allow us to have some consultation with the applicant first?
Consult with the applicant and the ward members.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Local members, Councillor Woodall and Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for the debate and the sincere consideration that you've given to this. Thank you for the inclusion of conditions for a grease trap, because if you smelt what the roundabout was like on the summer, you'd appreciate it. And also for further opportunity for further negotiation on delivery times. It will be hard to control how pedestrians use this site and how they dispose of the litter. But the bigger threat is the collapse of such a large building through neglect, which we have seen, unfortunately, in other buildings in the town. There may not be another chance to save it. So let's hope that the applicant delivers on their promises to revive this building and to make a positive contribution to our people in the town. Thank you.
I'll now move to Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for your deliberations. Thank you for the conditions. I've nothing more to add to Councillor Woodall's. I totally agree with what he's just said.
For that, much thanks. Can we now move to the vote? Can I, has the resolution as outlined in the report, plus the, I think, 3 addendums to that? Can I ask for those? That's been proposed and seconded. Yeah. Those in favour, please indicate.
10 in favour.
Those against? 1.
1 against.
Abstentions? 1 against. Right. Then that is carried. Can we now move fairly quickly if we have a quick change of speakers, Mr. Hulse and Mr. Tompkins, please take their seat in the public participation area. Right. I'll just wait for Councillor Stone to take his place. It's all right. You need sustaining? This is the 4th application for a self-built agricultural workers dwelling and associated works at Grendon Manor Farm, Bredonbury. Can I ask now Miss Morris to make the presentation to us?
Thank you, Chair. The application before you today seeks outline planning permission for the erection of one self-build agricultural workers' dwelling and associated works with all matters reserved. Grendon Manor Farm sits at the end of a private drive, approximately 500 metres south to the A44, and roughly as the crow flies, 0.7 miles west of Breedenbury and 4 miles from Bromyard. The site is located outside of any defined settlement boundary and is therefore, in planning terms, considered to be located in open countryside. The application site itself relates to a parcel of land at the farm located halfway along the private drive to the farmyard and is outlined in red on the current slide. A public footpath runs along the farm track to the immediate north of the application site. This aerial view shows the application site within the red circle and the surrounding built form. The site includes an extensive range of agricultural buildings comprising 6 poultry sheds and 12 general purpose agricultural buildings. The farm currently has 2 on-site dwellings, Grendon Manor Farmhouse, part of which is used for a B&B business, and that's identified within the yellow circle, and a bungalow known as the Sticking Field, which is located at the farm entrance and is highlighted within the orange circle at the top of the image. The farm also owns an additional dwelling located on Winslow Road in Bromyard. Its approximate location in relation to the farm is shown on the Google Maps screenshot currently displayed on the screen. Next are some photos from within and adjacent to the application site to give members some context. The top image shows the view from the farm entrance looking along the farm track towards the application site. The next image shows the site when viewed from the A44 Worcester Road. The image to the top left shows the view from the public footpath and the farm track looking south across the application site. The top right photo is taken from the site looking towards the farmyard, and the image at the bottom is taken from the site looking back towards the farm entrance. The principle of the development is discussed in detail at paragraph 6.1 to 6.44 in the committee report. As the site lies outside any identified settlement, the proposal must be assessed against the exception criteria contained within the core strategy policy RA3, which includes dwellings required to support a rural enterprise in accordance with policy RA4. Policy RA4 permits new dwellings where it can be clearly demonstrated that there is a sustained and functional need for the accommodation, that the dwelling forms an integral part of a financially sustainable business, and that this need cannot be met within existing accommodation. The application and supporting documentation have been independently reviewed by the Council's appointed agricultural consultant. The consultant found that there is a functional requirement for a farm worker to live on site, however there is not considered to be a functional need for more than one person to reside at the farm. They concluded that there is no essential need for an additional dwelling at Grendon Manor. In summary, the proposed development fails to accord to the development plan when read as a whole, which is not outweighed by other material considerations. While the application relates to a well-established and viable agricultural enterprise, the application as submitted fails to demonstrate that there is an essential need for an additional dwelling. The identified need can be met through existing accommodation on the holding, supplemented by support from the Winslow Road property. Furthermore, the proposed dwelling would occupy a relatively elevated position, be detached from the existing built form, and would not reflect the historic pattern of development, and as such would result in adverse impacts on the landscape character and visual amenity of the area. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now I'll move to the public speakers. Can I invite Mr. Hulse to speak on behalf of Brainbury Group Parish Council? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of Brainbury Group Parish Council, I'd like to address 3 points. Firstly, the need for the dwelling. Grendon Manor Farm is a large agricultural enterprise of which poultry is only one element. In addition to 180,000 poultry, there are currently over 500 sheep, many of whom are in lamb, as well as an animal feed manufacturing and supply business. We believe that it's essential to have not only the poultry manager on site, but also the additional worker to be housed in the proposed dwelling, to ensure permanent support both to the poultry manager, including when they're off-site, as well as to undertake other essential activities on the farm. We don't believe that the officer's report recognises this dual role. Secondly, the absence of suitable alternative accommodation. It's not practicable to subdivide the bed and breakfast accommodation in the main houses, which is a listed building. To create a separate dwelling would necessitate alterations to the building that would be detrimental to its historic character. In any event, the bed and breakfast activity has operated successfully for over 25 years, and it remains an important tourist asset to the area. The suggestion that the existing accommodation in Bromyard would be suitable, we believe, is highly misleading. in that it fails to recognise the need to be on site rapidly to avoid the potentially catastrophic mortality rate which can occur in the event of an emergency. The report fails to take account both the time required to dress before leaving home, and secondly, the subsequent need to change into the required biosecure clothing before entering the poultry unit. Even a few minutes can make a huge difference in these circumstances, and frankly speaking, we think Bromyard is simply too far away in the event of an emergency. Thirdly, the location of the proposed dwelling. We accept that there's some impact on the character of the area immediately surrounding the site, but the location is dictated by the need to separate this proposed family dwelling from the existing farm buildings with their associated agricultural activities and vehicle movements. It would also maintain the essential balance between safety, especially for a small family, and the biosecurity requirements of a modern poultry unit. Any negative impacts are limited and should be balanced against the pressing need to provide on-site accommodation to support the ongoing viability and diversification of this farming business. In summary, the proposed dwelling is essential for the operation of the business and meets the requirements of both the core strategy and our neighbourhood plan. We believe that failure to provide suitable housing for our young farmers threatens the future viability of this industry and, in turn, the rural economy. In our view, your officer's report fails to give sufficient weight to the pressing operational issues associated with running this large, modern and successful agricultural business and the resulting need for additional on-site accommodation. We respectfully ask that you give full weight to these needs and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now invite Mr. Tompkins to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. In reviewing the officer report, there are three main areas of concern: whether there is an essential need for a second dwelling, whether that need can be met by existing accommodation, and landscape impact. Firstly, the need for a second dwelling arises principally from the poultry enterprise, but also from lambing and wider farm management. The NPPF confirms that its essential need includes enabling the effective operation of a rural agricultural enterprise. That is the case here. Your agricultural advisor's conclusion that only one person is needed on site is not supported by the evidence. Nighttime alarms occur 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes twice in one night. It is neither reasonable nor safe for one person to respond to all alarms and still undertake a full working day the following day. This would present clear health and safety issues. At present, these duties are shared between Joe, the applicant, and the poultry manager. Joe's current arrangement of living with his parents, who are now retired, in the farmhouse is not sustainable or appropriate. This is why a second dwelling is required. Secondly, the agricultural advisor suggests the farm manager could be housed either within the part of the farmhouse operating as a B&B or in accommodation at Bromyard, which is 4 miles away. The B&B has operated for more than 25 years and is unquestionably lawful. It generates vital income for the farm and supports the wider rural economy, particularly in connection with the nearby wedding venue at Breedenbury. It would not be appropriate to require Joe to occupy the B&B. Equally, it is unrealistic to expect a farm manager to live in Bromyard. Joe works long hours, carries significant managerial responsibilities, and needs to be on site to ensure animal welfare and the proper running of the enterprise. Critically, alarm response times must be within 15 minutes. It's no use suggesting that they might be responded to in 15 minutes for the majority of the time. Every alarm must be responded to within 15 minutes. If just one journey were to take longer, that might be catastrophic for the flock of birds, causing significant welfare and economic issues for the farm. Such a response time cannot be regularly achieved from Bromyard once travel time and biosecurity procedures are taken into account. We are firmly of the view that the farm manager must live on site to ensure safe, timely and effective operation of the poultry unit and the wider farm. Third, regarding landscape impact, the proposal occupies a small corner of the field adjacent to the farm track and sits within the setting of the existing farm. The location would allow the occupant to remain within sight and sound of the poultry unit and livestock, whilst also maintaining surveillance of the access drive. The site location is appropriate. Thus, in our view, the 3 issues cited in the officer report are not credible reasons to refuse this application. The proposal would enable proper succession planning, as expressly encouraged by the NPPF. It enables the next generation to take on the running of the farm in a way that ensures its continued effective and sustainable management. We therefore request that you approve the development as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could now take your seats back in the public gallery, please. Thank you. Can I now invite Councillor Baker, the local ward member for this item? He speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. He has a time limit of 10 minutes. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I thank Amber Morris for her report, but not for her recommendation, but and her presentation in torrential rain and wind yesterday. It was probably one of the quickest site visits we've ever had. That was awful. But and thanks to members for turning up. That was beyond and beyond. This Grandon Manor Farm has been run successfully for the last 2 generations by the Piggott family, and it's now been taken over by their son Joe for their 3rd generation. And this application is for a family home for Joe and his partner for when they decide to produce children. And of course, the land agent, or the agricultural advisor, what they call them nowadays, is saying that he should be living off-site in Bromyard. Dreadful. I don't agree with that at all. I don't really know what prompted him to say that. But there we are. This agricultural enterprise is successful and sustainable, and there is definitely need for 2 people to be on site at any one time. This is mainly to respond to site alarms, ensure livestock welfare, biosecurity, and most of these alarms relate to the poultry farm. And of course they need 2 people to be present. They've got to wear PPE. Travelling from Bromyard in the middle of the night is just not possible. And of course the Red Tractor Assurance Scheme requires that alarms are responded to within 15 minutes. And this is confirmed by Avara Foods, who use their birds. Protocols obviously must be followed, requiring personnel to wash their hands, dress in PPE at the entrance to the site, changing footwear, hand washing at the entrance to each poultry house, and so it goes on. And most of these alarms are for the biomass boiler that will sound simultaneously with our alarms for the poultry units. And so I think with all these alarms going off, I mean, really and truly, you probably want more than 2 people on site. But Mr. and Mrs. Piggott Senior, who ran the farm before, now live in the farmhouse, which they're allowed to do. It's their house, it's their home, and part of their business, as we've heard, for a B&B, which has been running for 25 years, bringing tourists into the area. Joe is still living in the family home, but he needs his own house with his partner and for the future family that they'll produce. And it's important, really, that we allow it. The agricultural advisor was saying that if they did have a house on site, that it should be closer to their farm buildings. My view is, if they want a family home with children in the future, they want to be away from the farm buildings itself, and certainly not near the entrance to the farm, which is on the busy and dangerous A44. So what I would say to you briefly, looking at the MPPF, there's a particular paragraph in there, 84E, homes in the countryside should be supported. It says, where there is an essential need for a rural worker, including those taking majority control of a farm business, to live permanently at or near their place of work in the countryside. And this is what we have here. The older generation of the family have retired, passed majority control to their son, who needs a place to live with his family on the farm itself. And I would urge you to approve this application. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Many hands that have come up. Can I say, Councillor Hamlin, and then Councillor Woodhall, and then Councillor... Yep, Ingle.
Thank you, Mr.
Engel.
Chairman. We've heard some excellent arguments in favour of this dwelling being built, and I can only agree with them all. I think it's ever so important. This enterprise is successful. I've known of the Piggott family for many years. They are respected, well thought of people. They run a good business, and it seems to me entirely reasonable that they would need a minimum of 2 people to carry it on successfully. So my vote is in favour of this.
Councillor Woodhall.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree that you know that it should be allowed to build a house in this area, a residential house on their land in this area, and I understand why they would want to have the people in proximity. However, I still question why it needs to be on the brow of that hill in that desolate spot where the wind was howling yesterday. Why does it need to be there? Why not closer to the main farmyard buildings, to the built area property, with the facilities, with the shelter, with proximity to grandparents? If they, I mean, we're assuming so much, it's ridiculous, but why have it there? Why not? And one of the arguments was that, well, because of the safety issues, you know, you've got agricultural buildings, you've got the broiler rooms, you've got biosecurity problems, but then that doesn't stand up because you've got a B&B right next to it. So actually they undermine their own argument against having a residential property there. I believe they should have one. I just don't understand why it's put there. And where's the poultry manager again? It's the cottage. Is that in the main built-up area? I didn't see it anywhere on the map where the poultry manager was going to be. No, that's the house on the main road. It's not on that one, is it?
Winslow Road
Is that the one on Winslow Road? Is that the one on Main Road?
Yeah. No, that's down
No.
by the co-op at the back far end of...
No, so it's not that one.
Can
It's the
we
one on the
please
road.
turn to-
Yes, sorry. It was the one on the road. It was the one on the end of the road. Okay. So, yeah, I don't understand. They need a property, but I don't understand why it has to be in that exposed area. Why can't it be nearer to the main farmhouse?
Can I say that it's always been the case that we've enforced that sort of thing before? Precedent is, including in my family case, where the planners enforced that it had to be within the main curtilage of the actual farm. Right. Councillor Wood or Councillor Engel.
Well, this is, I think this is sort of a historic moment of agreeing with Councillor Baker. And I'm very glad. It is absolutely normal in these kind of cases of generational farmers living on, sometimes changing places when after retirement and going into live in the main house. It's part of it's part of the whole lifespan of the countryside, and I find this idea of people telling people where they ought to live. Oh, you can live in Bromyard. Oh, live with your mum. Why don't you? I just think this is a kind of thing that really is not what councils should be doing. This is absolutely normal. There were no objections whatever to this. That I saw no from the village. I saw no objections whatever, and I think that I think we should all taking everything into account. I don't think there's any doubt that we should be interfering in what's in this.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you for the presentation. Now, erecting an agricultural workers' dwelling on site of the farm is perfectly acceptable. However, the application site is on a wide open landscape. The character of the site is aptly described as rolling open plateau. The proposed dwelling will have a negative out of character impact on the landscape and likely to be an eyesore. A new development ideally needs to be much closer to the existing farm buildings. And at the moment, I can't see any way of supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. I have entire sympathy with the family in wanting to retain all generations on the site and support their son's transition to running the farm and enabling his future family or existing or future family to grow up and continue that tradition. But I think Councillor Engel actually said it in what he was saying. There's usually a transition of the younger generation into the farmhouse and the main farmhouse. I don't want to get involved with understanding, you know, their bed and breakfast arrangements and who's running what. But if we are therefore going to say that we're allowing additional buildings for them, it does need to be within the curtilage of the farmhouse. If it has been sustainable for their family to grow up in the farmhouse with the proximity to all the existing biosecurity, I'm not quite understanding the argument being made now that they now need to be further away from the site for biosecurity reasons or etc. So I really sympathise with the planning officer's predicament here in that we have a policy for a very clear reason to protect our landscape. Our whole Herefordshire countryside is made up of farms that obviously would like to build additional buildings on their land for their families, and we do have that exception, but it does have to be within the context of the already built form, and this is very clearly not. We've also hampered by this being an outline application and very limited information to support it. So there may not be such an issue, but I don't see how you could mitigate that location being that far away from the existing settlement dwellings. So I think I know which way the committee's going, but if anyone else wants to say anything else, I'd be interested. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Yeah. Thank you very much to the young officer. What a bit.
Microphone on.
Keep forgetting that, very sorry. I forget my own voice. Well, for you, some of you know my background. The last 30 years has been building, previous to that was farming. I have seen once before an application for a cottage for a farming worker turned down. But I think if you know anything about poultry, 15 minutes probably is too late. With these broiler houses, they are light proof, so lightning is not a problem, but I can assure you from actually being in a poultry business, thunder is something, they'll go to a corner, and if you're not there within almost seconds, you have got hundreds of birds dead. So it is necessary. The parish council, I've sat on this, 2.5 years now, I've never heard a parish council support a family in this way. So I think that's something we must be mindful of. And the reason that they probably want it where they do, talk about, Councillor over there, about habited in the curtilage. I don't know how many of you people can remember, but about 12 years ago, family just outside Ledbury, on the Trumpet to Preston Cross Road, their son was run over by a tractor on the farm. Tractors are very, very large. Now, you don't, if you ever sit in them, you can't even see your wheels. So I think we really, really have got to support this. So I hope that you will all, despite sort of, your reservations, I think we've got to support this, and we've got to support this young family to progress. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think that was the wettest and windiest planning application site visit I've ever been on. But I like everybody else, I'm extremely sympathetic to the needs of the young family, wanting to live separately from the parents. And I'm sure that's a family thing. But I must say, when I saw the site, when we actually stood there, I thought to myself, why here? Why not nearer the rest of the farm complex, a much more sheltered position? So I feel very split on this, but I really feel in the end I shall have to support the officer recommendation. They should propose to relocate it nearer the main complex of the farm buildings.
Right, have we got any other speakers? Can I have a proposal?
Sorry, can I just make one point on what's been said? The problem of from my experience, is not having farmers' families living on the farm. It's farmers using dubious devices such as Class Q to have other people's families on their farm and thereby get out of farming.
You're going into a different
No.
sphere altogether, which has
No.
no relevance whatsoever to this.
No, it did.
Other than you're sort of Donald Trump of the Golden Valley, populism trying to come aside. That has no relevance. Policy Q has no relevance whatsoever to this particular application, one way or the other.
But that's
if this is a planning committee, not a public debating about other issues that are not related.
issue was raised about farmhouses being built for families in the middle of the farm, and I've not seen a problem in that in many, many years.
Sorry, that was contrary to what you were saying. Can we have a proposition?
May I propose that we allow this application?
Can you give the grounds, please? Planning. No, the arguments in favour of the planning. Yeah. You've got to say it.
I haven't got any policies there. I'm sure that somebody will.
Miss Gibbons.
Just refer back to the officer report in terms of RA3, RA4, and I think what you need to be considering is whether or not the officer has considered that there is not a need for the property. That's the recommendation. So members, from what I've heard, are concluding that there is a need, and you obviously need to confirm if that is the case, that's why you're, on the basis of what you've heard, read, seen, that you are of the opinion that differs from the advice that we're giving and that we've had, that there is a need. And likewise, we also need to have a debate about whether or not you consider that landscape impact, as the recommendation is for refusal on landscape. We need to have a conversation about whether or not, why you disagree with that landscape recommendation for refusal. The policies are in the recommendation, but I think those are effectively the two matters that you need to clarify for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that all the members were of agreement that they felt that there was a need for this particular, but it's the issue is the actual siting. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Thomas.
Chairman, can I just ask, is this an outline application? So this will actually come back before us? No?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Then we might defer it and ask them to come back with an application nearer to the farm complex.
It's a different application site, so we need to determine this application on its, and then determine this application. Any change to siting would be a new application.
Right. Any further comments from the officers before we move to the local member?
We haven't got reasons.
Sorry, Councillor Cole.
Surely if the landscaping person disagrees, that can be improved with tree planting and all sorts of things. It'll just disappear.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a rural economy and it needs to be supported. They've obviously thought carefully about the site and I think it should go for approval.
Well, that's already been done. Sorry. Yeah. Councillor Simmons.
Can I just say, Chair, I think this is really frustrating. I absolutely support that family's right to continue farming, and I support farming. I live on a farm. I see the generational impacts on farmers. They are absolutely needing our support. However, this is an outline application. They have not supplied the information to enable us really to understand Why specifically that location? We've heard from their applicant agent, which has given some allusion to that. He has given you the policy grounds. We have got a really substantial objection from our landscape officer. And if you disagree with them, then we really need to state why. Now, I don't disagree with the landscape officer's determination of that. I do, however, support the rural exception. But, you know, it's beholden on us as a committee to explain that and understand it. Now, I didn't bring this recommendation. I have got real reservations about the specific location. I would really like them to be able to build another property within the farm and closer to that has less landscape impacts. They clearly have not decided on that, but they haven't made it very clear to us what the grounds are that we, as a committee, could go against our planning officer's recommendation.
Sorry, any comment from the officers?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbons?
Yeah, sorry. So in terms of the, you know, for members, something members need to have a think about when they're talking about the reasons they're giving for recommending approval. So I think from in terms of the need side of things, I think you've covered that. In terms of the landscape, or potential landscape impacts of a development in this location, we need to probably understand, I think, as Councillor Sims has explained, why either you think that this, you know, there will be a landscape harm, but you are you feel that this development, you know, can we go ahead with, you know, taking on board that landscape harm and why, or you need to, you know, you need to expand on or explain why you disagree with the landscape officer's comments. Just another point as well, we also need, if you are recommending approval, we would need to look at the conditions that would be imposed, so agricultural tie and other, we can advise on the more other technical conditions such as the drainage and the landscaping and that side of things, but also the whether or not it would be an agriculturally tied property, which it would and should be.
Sir Stone.
Thank you, Chairman. I very much agree with all the sentiments expressed by Councillor Cole, because representing a similarly very rural area. But on the other hand, we need to clarify this matter over landscaping and about the position. And I don't think it was been sufficiently clarified even during our debate. So I very much agree with Councillor Andrews, who was suggesting deferring, could we say, till the next meeting, so there's a chance for this to be sorted out, because at the moment we just haven't tied it up properly, to my mind, and very frustrating for the family, very frustrating for everyone. But I do think we need to get it right, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Woodall.
As we've been told, we can't defer it based on the location because that would constitute a new application. So actually, maybe the best course of action is to agree with the officer's recommendation to refuse this and allow the family to come back with another application, because they know how we feel now about the need. They know that. So what they also know is we don't agree about the location. So if we refuse this now or accept the officer's application, and then that will give them the opportunity to come back again in the future with another outline application or a more detailed application nearer to the curtilage with a more certainty of success. So in a way, we could be helping them by refusing this. So my proposal would be to accept the officer's recommendation.
Can I,
planning officer.
Yeah, I just come back on that. You can make the decision to refuse on one ground. You can make the decision to refuse on landscape impact and the siting, and not progress with the argument in terms of need, because I think that's fairly. I think you've accepted that there is a need, and therefore you could progress with a reason for refusal purely on the landscape ground alone, but that would need to be proposed to us.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I'll accept that. Propose that on the grounds of refusal of the location.
We can't do that. We've got to vote on the refusal and then put that as an additional proposition. Yeah, either we vote on it or either we withdraw it or we vote on the.
I'm happy to withdraw based on what we've just said.
Okay. A seconder. Yeah.
Withdrawing.
Withdraw.
Well, I'm seconder, so it's a proposal that reduce backing down, I can't, my seconding wouldn't fly.
No. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Engel, did you want to say something?
Only that if there is going to be a motion on the basis of on this basis, can we delete the phrase nearer the curtilage, because that's not the point. Perhaps that it's a big farm, they may be able to find somewhere else. So I don't think the curtilage is significant, and I think that would tie their hands.
I think we've got to have a reason to do it, but Ms. Gibbons.
I think the reason for refusal will be based on the landscape impact of the proposed property. Where if this application is refused and they're revisiting the siting as part of a new application, then we're not dictating where that should be as part of this committee. All we're saying is that what's proposed now is unacceptable. It's for the applicant to go away, take stock of that, and then to go, if they wish to make a new application in a different location, they can take into account what's been said. That's fine.
Yep. Right. If we got that.
Who's going to propose that?
Oh, I think it has been proposed by.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Foxton. Anyway, come to Councillor Baker. Without the section about need. Yeah. Concerning need. Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Woodall, could I just ask to clarify that your proposal is to refuse the planning permission on the second ground set out in the officer's recommendation only?
Yep.
Thank you.
Right. We'll just go back to Councillor Baker finally. Yeah, seconded. Yeah, that was seconded by Councillor Foxton. Yeah. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't agree with deferral or refusal. Obviously, you've heard what I had to say earlier on. We talked about this house, the location. That would have been discussed with the family, with their agent, and everyone else, and possibly with the officer before this was submitted. It's not going to be just a house plonked in the middle of a field. It will have fencing and hedging and everything else around it to protect the future family, children, etc. And it's within the curtilage of the farm, isn't it? The farm is the farm, and it's within its curtilage, so I can't see the problem. I think we should also add that it complies with.
Can I say we've got a resolution?
Well, I'm just making my point, but I'd just say that RA3 applies, as does NPPF paragraph 84E.
Right. We have a resolution in front of it, a proposal in front of us. Can I ask for those in favour, please indicate. Those against? 4. 4. 4. Abstentions? None. Then that resolution is carried. Can I thank you all for your attendance, and can I ask that the live stream now is closed? Thank you all for your